Right, well, we can go ahead and get started. Sorry, I apologize for all of your guys' time being on time and we weren't, so. Let's start, go ahead and start with the good news.
Okay, these are online and you've probably seen them, so I won't spend a lot of time with it, but just mention what I had in there for this meeting. We had Drake Honor Jazz Band, Little Hawkeye Conference Honor Band. Katie Naylor was the Chamber Educator of the Year. It was nice. We had Rob and Ken there for that event too. Our young men who are going to Boys State are mentioned there. Some academic decathlon information, and then middle school Simpson Honor Band. So lots of music this time. That's what I had for you for the good news.
Excellent. All right. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does everyone have time to review that?
And the contract on driver's ed's the same as we usually do.
Yes, we did have legal look at it, so it has that touch on it.
There's a slight increase. It went from 325 to 345, but that's pretty reasonable comparatively still to what's out there, so.
I'll move
Several years
approval.
ago, we did kind of a survey, I remember, hasn't been that long ago. And it was competitive and it's extremely convenient compared to some other things, so.
Yeah, it's been a good
Unless
partnership.
something's
with them.
really changed, it seems like it's about the best we can do. with that.
And then the district pays for some of the students and it pays for,
Free introduced, yeah.
Yep.
that's,
Which again is not, it's not typical. That's been nice that they have helped to handle some of that cost.
do you know about what percent of students, does anyone know, we help in that regard?
You know, because it's hard to know because you got freshmen taking it, sophomores taking it, and sometimes juniors taking it, so you don't know. It's not like you can't say that it was 25 kids that were all freshmen, you know, so you really don't know. That it's probably we get 10 to 15 each time
Okay,
that they do it.
okay.
Pretty often. I don't know how long driver's ed takes, it seems to be very short, so.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Ken to approve the consent agenda, seconded by Carolyn. Any further discussion from the board? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next, let's see, any communication delegation?
Sign up to speak on, or I don't think so. And we might, I don't know if people would want to consider flipping the provision delegation of health services and the school calendar. School calendar might take some conversation. We do have our school nurses here to present. Would anybody mind switching those two district items?
No.
Okay.
Good. You guys are up.
You can stay.
What are we gonna say in our photo renewal?
That mic will pick up, and it'll be good for people watching at home, so,
Okay.
yep.
All right.
Well, we just want to thank you all for letting us have this opportunity to come and communicate with you, the student health services here in Indianola, and some of the board policies that govern student health services. Just to introduce what student health services are and how we are structured. My name is Brooke Charleville. I'm a registered nurse, and I have Whittier Model Elementary. And this is Katie Williams. She's also a registered nurse, and she has the middle school and high school. And then Diane Nelson, another registered nurse, and she has Emerson and Irving. So again, thank y'all for this opportunity. To me, one of the biggest pictures we want to present to you all is just how we're structured. There are 6 buildings here in Indianola, and each building has a health office. And each of those health offices are staffed with a health associate who is an unlicensed assistant personnel. And then they have a shared RN. So we both, as I mentioned before, we have 2 buildings each. Those health associates are part-time in that office. And we go into how we run those is through delegation. And so that's why we included that in your board packet is the Department of Education's interpretation of what delegation is in the school system. So that you know kind of how we do things and why we do it that way. The biggest reason why we have to delegate, obviously, is, for one, is to make sure our students are healthy and taken care of. If there's not a nurse present in every building, we are given the ability to delegate based off of state law. We are held to our standards of practice by our license, and that is where delegation comes into play. The registered nurse has that right to delegate certain tasks as long as they fall within state law guidelines. So that is kind of how we are structured here. Any questions? We open communication with you. Please feel free to ask us any questions. This was our goal, is just to communicate with you all, because we haven't done that before. So we look forward to asking if you have any questions or concerns regarding delegation. And then as we go into maybe discussing some of these specific policies, that you can present any questions at that time as well.
So we did have something specific come up the last
We're talking
meeting.
about the diabetics.
The
Yes,
diabetics.
that-
So
we're gonna-
I'm not trying to set you up, but it's like,
No.
yeah, that was a question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We're gonna get into that more
Okay.
specifically
Oh,
too. But,
I do have a question for
Yeah.
you, Brooke. How many health associates do we have
so we have 6 health associates, yep,
total?
total.
So will you paint the picture for me, like at Whittier and Wilder? It's you,
And my health associate there, yeah,
okay, and then is there just one health associate in every
every building, yeah.
every building?
So there's every health office in every building has a health associate. That's their part-time. They're not, they work their 30 hours a week.
Yes, okay.
So what's that time range,
yeah, what's their
like eight
school
to
day?
2 or?
Does it coincide with your schedule? Is that,
It,
or
it,
opposite?
it rotates. We do a little juggling act, yes, so that we can make sure that they stay within their hours. But they're normal, depending on, I hate to say week by week, but sometimes it is depending on if they're out. If we have another building that doesn't have a health associate because they're out for a sick child or sick themselves, we do have to kind of do a little balancing act there.
Is
So,
there- Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so I guess that would be one of my biggest questions is, so if you're at Whittier and your health associate at Wilder is sick for the day, do we have people that are in place to cover that? How does that scenario work?
Yep, so that scenario would be, if I'm available, then I would go to that building and cover that building. If I'm not available, if I'm covering another building, then I would reach out to Katie and Diane to see if they could go over there
So-
and cover that building.
So then we would have to pull Katie away from the middle school and the high school and bring her to Wilder if there's an issue.
Yep.
Do we
So
ever
we
have
can have
schools that are
somebody
not?
staff the building.
Is
I
there
mean, if you
times
think
when-
about 30 hours, that's not a full week, but it's not, there's
We have,
overlap.
5 school
Yeah.
days, and our instructional time is computed at 6.6 hours.
No, I understand that, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
when a health associate is
It's tricky.
sick,
Yeah.
like completely sick,
So I can give an example. We had, my high school health associate was ill one day. So just recently, last week, so the middle school health associate was at the middle school and I was at the high school. At that time, I got called to do a urine drug screen at the bus barn. And so then essentially, that high school was left with no assigned health provider, whether it be a registered nurse or an unlicensed assistive personnel, in that building until I returned from my drug screen.
That was my question. Has our schools ever gone where, and you answered that, but
Yeah.
especially like where we have diabetic kids that have reactions quickly and need assistance quickly, has there ever been somebody that there was not that covered? I guess, what is the plan if you're both out and there's nobody there, is who?
Oh,
I'll take this one.
yeah,
So, in that delegation, part of that is there's always decision-making, always looking at where are the priorities, where's the acuity meaning like where are your most complex students? And so as you're making these decisions and as you're trying to decide, what do we do? We kind of shuffle through all of that and then we make sure that those needs are met. And so the example that I gave, it was a semester testing day, which means that very few or not as many high school students are in the building. So I was comfortable telling my secretaries, I'm gonna be at the bus barn, call my cell phone. If you can't answer, or if you can't get to me, or if I can't get right back to you, do call 911. So I think at the last meeting, the statement was brought up, are we just calling 911? Well, we're not just calling 911. It is in circumstances like when I have a sick health associate and I get called to the bus barn, the high school is left unattended until I can return. And thankfully, we are very blessed to have a very supportive EMS team here in Indianola. I mean,
Do you think that is the best case scenario with the staff we have? Or is it, like, to protect you guys? Like, I'm
Right.
looking as far as to protect you guys, if a parent were to come back and just say, so there was nobody, I mean, do you,
Right.
do you,
to just answer your question, honestly, I don't think it's a best case scenario. We're doing the best we can with what we have. We're very, the women that we work with are amazing women.
Wonderful, we're very blessed.
We are, but at the end of the day, they are unlicensed. They're not licensed medical professionals. And essentially,
no, I know the health associates and you guys do an amazing job. But I also know that there's only a few of you to cover a lot of people.
Are you ever worried as far as, I mean, and I have a cousin who's diabetic, and are you guys ever worried that if you have to step out of there, and I know, they can go into a quick seizure, are you guys ever worried you're not covered enough, or you don't have enough staff or enough resources?
that's a good point.
Yeah, I think we could benefit. I have to be honest with you, yes, there's moments, but that's part of, when we're put in those positions, our goal is to keep the child safe. So, speaking from an elementary setting, it is different when it comes to diabetic care in the elementary setting versus at the middle school and high
Right.
school. And I say that what our goal for care for those diabetic students when they hit middle age and high school is to be able to self-care for themselves. With us, there to be a support. But at the elementary level, the need is so
different,
much
yeah.
different. And so when you get put in a situation, if we're lack of coverage, then it becomes, we're in touch with the parent and let them know if we ever dig into that situation. I have not been in that situation where I didn't have adequate coverage, thankfully pulling from Katie and Diane or some, getting those resources in. But to say that it couldn't possibly happen, there's a potential there, yes. So-
And there's several times, like at Irving, there are 4 diabetics.
Yeah, that's what I
And
was,
those 4 diabetics, they're brittle. All the diabetics that I've met at the elementary level, they're brittle. They can be I have it over and over again, a child that can be over 200 points, 200, within an hour, they're down to 54.
Yep.
So, we have CGMs, and
Yeah.
thankfully, we react to the CGM number faster than anybody else. I don't let them get too low, where I'm not reacting.
and so that's the text you get, right?
It's a continuous glucose monitor.
Right,
through-
that
yep.
parents have that get the text and tell you what they're,
So there's little-
what they're going.
Their numbers.
Okay.
And usually, just not one is, dropping. It's like 3 or 4.
Right.
It just seems like, oh, it's the day, and then maybe all high the next day, and you don't worry about them so much. But then you have a day where they're just
They
not.
crash.
Yeah, and then we have issues where one of the, there's several rooms within Irving that they don't connect with the internet. And so there's one case right now that we have to go, if we don't find a number on her CGM that we see, then we're down there. So we do
To
a
find
lot
out
of
what it-
walking. Mhm.
To what's going.
Yeah, so we always react. We're not just sitting there.
Do you have any concerns at Emerson? You cover Emerson and Irving, right?
Yes,
So you have them at both schools
I
where you've
have
got
one at Emerson.
diabetic concerns?
If you know of rooms, do we know that, Ray?
I don't know, that's why.
I mean, if we know specific rooms, is there ways to address that,
That
so that there's
particular building,
connections, boosters, or?
Yeah, we can address that for sure. I mean, that particular building, we lit up like a Christmas tree like a year ago, so
And I've called several
I'd
times for
definitely
help.
like to see that. So,
And I don't know if there is a solution to a lot of it. It's just the building, and it can be the child's phone that they're given from home and how it's connected with the internet. Because we see that some that are on data from home they don't disconnect
That,
as
that I
much.
can definitely buy.
So,
If they're
yeah.
on a data plan, that's definitely
Yeah,
gonna
so
be
it
an
does
issue
make a
out there,
difference, but I've
but-
complained many times over the years, so.
Um,
so.
Is that
Excuse
something we can look into then,
Yeah,
to see if we can
if-
solve that
If
problem?
you haven't filed a ticket, please do that, and let's try and touch base tomorrow. There's no reason if they're on our network that at Wilder, they shouldn't be covered anywhere they're at.
I was just gonna say, I know at the last board meeting, we were having the discussion about that specific policy of diabetics and stuff, and I know
Do we have one?
we may have.
Do we have?
Yeah, I know we may have discussed
We'll
that
get into that.
aloud
Yeah.
and maybe said some things in not the best way, but what we were trying to do was understand the policies and
Absolutely.
make sure that we had things in place. And so maybe our speech and our discussion aloud may have came against you guys a little, and I apologize, like, we apologize as a board that you guys felt that way. We know
No.
you did. So I do apologize, because we
Well,
would
thank
never
you.
intend for you guys. We totally respect what you guys do and know you guys are trying your best to do what you can do for our students, and we'd never want you guys to feel that way, but trying to understand that, I guess, I was talking to my wife, she's a cardiac nurse, and I spoke with her and I said, so, this is what we're trying to understand as a board, and she says, well, why don't you just ask the nurses and stuff, and I was like, yeah, okay, we will.
Yeah,
So
thank
how
you.
often do you guys need to review these policies? Cause she said, things change in the medical world fast, like developments and things and best practices, and how often do you guys need to be looking at these policies? Cause we have board policies in place, and, they're all well and good, but if it's not keeping up with what needs to happen, then we need to make sure we're getting those updated, and so how often are you looking at those board policies to make sure that, like what Sue was saying last time, like, that there's a policy in place for that?
Well-
Do we need to have one?
Yeah, I think it came up because we were looking at all these self-administered ones with the EpiPen and the inhaler. And that's when we got to talking, well, wait a
I
minute.
think so.
That's
what
when
about all the
diabetics come up.
The diabetics,
Yeah.
and so that's
Yeah.
when we had asked, really, is there a policy, like, what are
Yes.
you guys running your, we'd
Yeah.
love to know how you guys are doing this, and
So-
what can we do to protect?
So
Thank
we
you.
have approached looking at policies before in the past, and we were advised to create our student health service handbook. And so I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read that handbook, but that covers the student health services here in Indianola. Lays out kind of what we do, our delegation, how we're structured, the laws that we are governed by. It is, we review it annually, and that's kind of, that is what we were informed to be our policy.
So that's where the diabetic policy is.
That is where
So,
health, you go ahead.
Okay.
okay, to just kind of separate the two, so when you're talking about self-administering of EpiPens and inhalers, you have a very specific board policy for that. As far as reviewing the actual board policies, we've never been asked to do that or give any insight or input in any of that component of that. There's also a board policy for just administering medication. So you have to separate the two and understand that diabetes and self-medication of diabetes is not under this policy with the inhalers, and I always find that I talk with my hands a lot. So, anyway, so just separate the two and understand that diabetic care falls under completely different medication policy, and so to kind of just answer the question of when do diabetics self-administer and what does that, are they allowed to carry their own medication? Yes, they're allowed to carry their own medication based on doctor's orders, student maturity, parent consent. Most of the time it's outlined in the 504. So there are many, many layers of, what's the right word? Many layers of things to consider when you're talking about the care of a diabetic student. It is completely separate from the policy of the EpiPens and inhalers. I think we welcome any opportunity to sit down and look at any policies. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
I do have a
on
question.
proactive approach.
I have
Yeah.
a question, and I'm diabetic, but I'm not a child. So you talk about the highs and lows. So when they're crashing, what do you do? Like, I don't know, I mean, I know,
Yeah,
I don't have that flux, so I guess I'm trying to grasp, cause I know my cousin does, and I know he crashes hard, so can you tell me what you do? I mean,
Yeah.
what do you do to not have him crash? Have him eat something, or?
yep, so it's very specific to doctor's orders. Matter of fact, we wouldn't provide any, I mean, we have to have doctor's orders to provide diabetic care.
Right.
And of course, a lot of that too is parental, their thoughts and how they want things carried out as well. So we definitely take that into consideration. But they all have a diabetic care plan
Right.
that is created by the physician and the parents, and then that is what we follow in the school setting. So the doctor specifically says, blood sugar of 80, they need to come to the health office and have a 15-gram snack. Then that's exactly what we do. With the continuous glucose monitors, we are able to say, hey, they are trending down or they're double arrow down. So we know they're going to continue to drop, then we can be proactive and go in there
Right.
and get them treated so they don't go down too far.
If I may, Laura, when I was visiting some teachers at Whittier last week, there was a nurse's office I thought I'd stop in, asked a nice young lady if she was a nurse, and no, it was the health aide. And for some reason, I was just there 5 minutes. But I got to see the monitor and everything for the diabetic, understand the fact that the parents send whatever nutrition is needed that's kept in place. That school had 2, okay, it's a small school, and everything. And that how the aide is responsible. One of them came in because they were going on a field trip somewhere. I don't know where it was, packing whatever was needed for that person as it goes. Looked like a very, very smooth system that I saw with the health aide. My question, though, is always more staff is everybody's goal, if possible. But what is an advantage to train another associate to be a health aide for when there's people missing? The question why I
Yeah,
say that is some things you
absolutely.
train people for, and if they
Yes.
don't use it, you forget it.
No.
And you guys wouldn't, because you had some training, but.
So it's very involved, it's intense training. And then assuming that, we can, find that person that is, qualified and we
Yeah.
trust in them, then definitely we train them and then we make sure that they're capable, they're confident in doing those tasks. And then we supervise them and we continually to evaluate their performance. So we have, welcome to train other associates to be subs. That'd be great. Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys do amazing. I just, from being diabetic and knowing my cousin, and I hear all the ups and downs, I mean, kudos to you guys, because you know what, it's young kids like that. I agree with you when you say middle school and high school kind of can manage it, be responsible, where it's a young child. It's a little bit harder to
Yeah.
manage that because they don't quite understand why they're battling this, so I think kudos to you guys, because that's just,
Yeah, and I don't think there was ever any question of your guys' competency at all, ever. We just wanna know how we can keep you guys safe and keep our associates,
Absolutely.
everybody happy and all that. So you guys do an amazing job, and we would love any feedback on policies that if you go through and
Yeah.
say this isn't really,
I have one that we just did a second reading on January 13th, but Katie caught something that
I won't take credit for it.
or Brooke caught it, and Katie communicated. But, and it's a simple thing, but it deals with, it says that a kindergarten physical is required, and on our online registration, it says optional there, and the Department of Health, and we've checked on the Department of Ed website, it's not required, so we need to do a strike through on that. I just added that policy to our policy committee for February 4th, so there definitely is benefit in having trained eyes on those policies, so.
Do you guys feel, sorry, go ahead.
I just, first of all, just wanted to echo what Sue said. I know a family that has a diabetic student well and speak very highly of the nurse nursing staff. I just have a question, as far as how you guys handle the administering glucagon. I know like there's been a lot of advances on it, and there's a mist form of it now. So I think there's been some confusion whether glucagon is insulin. And from what I understand, it is not. It's just a hormone that basically gives you a sugar rush, gets you back up quickly. Is that something that, as it stands now, that the aide can administer, or is that strictly only?
So, I'll take this.
Yeah.
if you don't mind. Okay, if you look through this delegation process, it is a very specific, is this a task that can be delegated? Meaning, do we have expected outcomes? Is the staff member capable? Have they demonstrated, have I seen, as the one carrying the license, the skill being done successfully, and therefore I'm now assuming that this person can do it correctly based off this, that, you know, the train of thought continued on. So, it is awesome that glucagon is now available via nasal mister. So we do have a trainer on our campuses now, so I can actually say to my associates, hold this, squirt it, do this, and it's something that I can follow through the delegation process and say, my staff are trained in the event of an emergency, they're capable of doing this, it is something that, but not every diabetic student has that. It's based off of what the doctor has ordered, what the parents have provided, and
Could that delegation, could it go down even further to the classroom teacher if they've had the training on it, and that's something that the doctor or the family has?
so, just today, on the school nurse listserv, Melissa Walker, who is the registered nurse with the Department of Ed, who is like our school nurse hero, put forth some information regarding the fact that no, and I can tell you, because I printed it out, I was like, what timing? It is based off an Iowa code. Do you wanna write it down and look it up? Or I can just, it's right here, I printed that bad boy out. Iowa code 280.23, and it says that we cannot. So the board of directors, all this language, basically shall not require non-administrative personnel to perform any specific health service or intrusive non-emergency medical unless they are licensed or otherwise qualified to have consented to perform. So we cannot require those teachers to perform that task. They have to consent to perform that task. And then we have to go through the entire delegation process with them and confirm that yes, they're willing to, yes, they're capable, yes, they've been trained. So it's not something that we can actually require of them. If they choose to do so, then we have, but we can't make them.
Okay.
And my concern on any of this is our teachers are there with X number of students in the room that they're responsible for. And if they have to go assume this other role, we have the other youngsters there. So I'd like to see clean lines here if we can, plus liability is unbelievable, but, you know, on that, I just have a bad feeling about trying to get the classroom instructors involved in any area of this, if we can stay away from it, because their role is actually something else.
Well, like you said, the young person was going out on a field trip and was taking what they need. Now what if something happens out on the field trip to Capitol or wherever they
Yeah.
might be going? You're still getting that registered monitor, right? It's still registered and telling you what their scores are?
Yes, but it's, again, it's a piece of equipment, so if we're out and we're suspecting that the child is going low, then we'll do a finger poke, a blood glucose poke with their finger. All that equipment is with that child. If they're leaving to go on a field trip, they have everything that they need to be
Possibly
safe.
need, okay,
And the person that they're going with is trained in their care.
okay. That's
Yeah.
what, that was my
Yeah.
question is, do we have staff that goes with these
Yes.
guys when they're,
Well, usually with my schools, the health associate will go with them.
travels with them?
And then I
Okay.
will cover during that time at the school, so they're with them.
And parental,
Unless a parent decides they want to accompany, and then they will go with their
Then they
children.
take the responsibility,
Yeah.
okay. I was just curious when he brought that up,
and all the teachers, based on what health needs are in their classroom, they're educated to an extent, but they're not required to follow any procedures or any type of they're just knowledge of what's in their classroom and what to look for signs and symptoms so that they can send them to the health office with a buddy for diabetics or get the nurse to their classroom or something like that.
I just think we're gonna see more and more diabetics, just, I don't know if it's what we're eating or what we're doing, but it just seems the trend keeps going up. I mean, if you look some of the things online, look at the health trend, you're seeing some of that. Where, and being allergic to different things, it just seems to be growing. So,
Autoimmune disorders are
yeah, I think it just feels like we're getting more and more and more, and not just our school district, there's other districts, but, so it's kind of informed us that we know, that we're seeing it, what you guys are having to do.
It's consistent across the board in a variety of health concerns. The health needs are definitely increasing within the school system. So it's just I think we're just gonna, see a continuing trend.
Last fall when I had met with you guys, or Katie, I think I had met with, in regards to needs in our district, and you had given me this, would this still be up to date with what you gave me last fall?
It would be similar, consistent.
Okay.
I would expect it to parallel, to say that it's identical.
Okay.
If not, obviously we have.
And this is what you presented you presented this to the board last year during 2019 school year?
No, we did not.
Okay. Okay.
Just to administration.
Okay, so this, just so you guys know, it's a document, I got it last fall, it just shows where the needs are, like how many cases of diabetics we have in each of our schools, seizures, mental health, daily medications, office visits. It's really informative, I think, from a board's perspective, to understand where the need is in each one of the school, to understand this as a board member, to help us determine, like, hey, do we have everything we need to? Because these are to me, it's a huge number. You guys had gone on to show like a plan in place of making it come up to, would this bring it up to current standards? Are we below current standards? Where are we in regards to school nurses, health associates, I guess,
So,
right
in
now?
understanding that money doesn't grow on trees,
Right,
and trying to work towards the goal, the School Nurses Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all recommend one nurse in each school building every single day. So, in understanding again, Rome wasn't built in a day, so if we could even just add one, what would that do for us? And that was our proposal, to be working towards having a school nurse in every building every day. That would be what we would like to see as we're moving in that direction.
I can make copies and get this
Yeah,
to
I'd like
all
to
of
see
you
that.
guys. Yeah, I feel like it helps me understand like what you guys are dealing with on a daily basis. It shows their averages all broken down. I feel like it's a really good presentation of where they're at.
When I was out to
It's
Wilder
still
today
relevant.
visiting, and I happened to just stop in the food service, just to stop and say hi and how things were going. And she explained to me that Mr. Rupp orders, the student couldn't digest protein, is that the word? Okay, so they order special food from a different, I think it was Cedar Rapids, she said, to bring it in, so that student has to eat exactly what is brought in, and Jim Rupp has to bring that in every week for that student. And that's something you guys are covering too, along with, there's a chain out there that has to be, Jim, and then the food service, and then you guys, so, I did not know that was happening.
Yeah.
And that was very enlightening to learn that today.
And that's just, we have that in several other buildings where, we have to get different departments involved, food services, transportation, you name it. So just so that the child is safe and can have the best access to their education. And that's our goal, is for
Yeah.
them to be successful.
Yeah, it was just interesting to learn
Yeah.
that today, so.
Yeah. Well,
We appreciate very much you
yes,
coming in
thank
and
you
the
all
information.
again.
Thank you.
This
Thank
is
you
what
very
we wanted to be able to communicate, and we're passionate about what we do, and our goal is to ensure that our kids are safe, and that is all we're expressing, is just to take care of our kids, and we want this to be able to communicate, with you, and we appreciate this a lot.
Thank
So,
you.
Thank you guys
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
I don't know. Trying to get together.
Yeah, go back and pick up this school
Yeah.
calendar.
All right. So go backwards, A1, under 5.
And we won't be insulted if you guys don't want to
Yeah.
stick around for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah, you can go if you want.
Yeah, we put you there so you
It's
could
a
go.
long day.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We have some of your school calendar committee members here
We
too,
do.
right? So it is on the agenda, so there's questions for teachers, you'll be able to ask them. So
Good.
some calendar reps here, so.
We have a traditional calendar for your consideration. I know we've had a lot of conversation leading up to this point about a new process and some of the different types of things that we're proposing with the calendar. As Art said, we've used our handbook committee this year to help us develop a calendar, and they've been very gracious of their time. I will say that I'm not sure they were aware of just how much time would be required, but they've really embraced it, and I think we have a better product for you than we have in years past. At least there have been more eyes on it. So that handbook committee consists of at least one teacher from every building. We've tried to have a good mix in terms of just demographics and grade levels and whatnot. So Greta and Lynn have been gracious enough to join us, and I think we are all prepared to answer any questions that you may have about the proposed calendar. You may recall in December, we had some conversation about just some general marching orders, if you will, about the calendar. We feel pretty good about the fact that we were able to do some things that we've really struggled with in years past, namely starting the calendar on time and ending it before Memorial Day. We've maintained many of our traditions in terms of having 2 full weeks during the Christmas holiday. We managed this year to have spring break coincide with all the Des Moines schools, DMAC, but also Simpson, which is something I don't know that we've been able to do before. So Simpson was not more cooperative, but it just happened, it worked out well. We've tried to, knowing that there are many things that are happening in terms of curriculum adoption, training requirements, we've tried to build in sufficient PD days at the beginning of school and then also interspersed days throughout the school year so that we can meet those needs. And then we've also talked about doing some things differently in terms of parent-teacher conferences, but I think we landed on allowing buildings to have discretion in terms of what that looks like. So I will do my best, and I would call upon my colleagues to help answer any questions that you have about the proposed calendar.
I like that you spread the PD days out, right? Is that what I just heard? You spread them
Yeah.
out and said not all 4 at the end?
Yeah.
That was one of the concerns at Wilder was, we stuck all those at the end, and they're like, kids, do you wanna get out? And they don't always remember it. When, one example was, one of the teachers said, we learned math. She goes, I didn't remember it come August. So they were kinda concerned about that those days, so and they said, why can't we put them some in the beginning and spread them out throughout the year? So kudos on that. That was one of their concerns today, so I'm glad we're looking at that.
And do you feel like those professional development days that are spread throughout the calendar year, do you feel like that's sufficient for when the teachers want to try to learn something or they need to learn something that, we've got enough in there?
I think what you're talking about is distributed practice. Once you learn something, you need to frequently practice it. And, it's almost like every 4 to 6 weeks when you're looking at adult learners to revisit that and get ingrained in it. That was why one of the requests was after that work day in January, at the semester time, to add PD day in there, because you're going a year and not going 3 months without one. So I appreciate the attention to trying to get that flexibility in there. But personally, when you look at adult learning, I think every 4 to 6 weeks, when you can come around, it just doesn't always work into balance between all of the things that Ron has listed that they try to work around, so.
It'd be difficult to make that happen.
And that's why too, sometimes on their Wednesday collaboration days, some of that additional learning comes in place. It just doesn't align when you have curriculum adoption, like with math, where you have a trainer there for multi-grade levels, to put that in place.
I just had a question, it might just be my memory. Have we usually done half-day professional development?
We dabbled. This past year, we've done
Yeah.
that in conjunction with parent-teacher conferences, and
Okay,
it seemed to work well.
now we're doing other ones?
Yep, and we've introduced those because it allows us to get some more days in there without messing up the length of the calendar. It also allows us to get kids in so that they're not, missing out on, not having such large breaks sometimes. So we felt like that was a good compromise. We've gotten pretty good feedback, I think, from teachers about those half-day
Have you heard
with kids, half-day training.
We might, I'm guessing, have some pushback for people with daycare, that if they're not just going downstairs, they've got to arrange.
Sure.
Give it a try, I'm just saying, I can just,
Yeah, I understand, and that's why I kind of responded, we've dabbled.
yeah,
We have done that this year.
I think it's worth trying, but.
Yeah, and I think it's worked well thus far. Now, whether that will meet with opposition doing it more widely, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think I speak for the entire group that we feel pretty good as a group about what the product that we have in place. There are some things there. The board's willingness to entertain those flex days, I think, was very well received by our group. We took the time to kind of sit down in our last meeting and just brainstorm what types of things could be accomplished during those days, and truly the list was overwhelming. So I'm very confident, I have a lot of trust in our teachers that those days, that are marked, I'm not sure what that symbol is. It's kind of it's a circle with a line through it. They're placed on August 13th, 14th, and 17th, more or less as placeholders. But those are days that teachers can use at their discretion. They need to document the days to fulfill their contract requirements. But those are days that teachers can work on online training, like the adverse childhood experiences training, the bloodborne pathogens training, mandatory reporter trainings. There's a lot that teachers need to do in terms of not just getting trained on curriculum, but actually using it, practicing it, preparing to implement it. And that's time that sometimes is kind of lost. Classroom preparation is always something that we struggle with. So the beauty of that, by having those 3 days in advance, those are days that teachers can focus on those kinds of things, so that when we get them back to school on the 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, now we can use that for professional development, for building meetings, to do team meetings in preparation of, preparing rosters and reviewing IEPs and those kinds of things. So those ideas were all driven by that committee, and I think we feel pretty good about that. Would you guys, anything you want to add to just the presentation of the proposed calendar?
No, I think the half-day, I think that's gonna be, see how that looks. And we initially wanted it to be on Fridays because we thought that might work better for parents, but the athletic department expressed that was not awesome for them, so, you don't know until you try it.
I think the biggest thing might be reminding people,
Yeah.
as the kids stand outside and don't get picked up or something.
And we did talk about, many years ago, we used to do that every month, we would get out on a half day for professional development. So it's kind of a return to that way of thinking.
Yeah, the teacher explained to me today that they used to do flexing, so if they came in on a Saturday and worked, they documented their hours, did it. So she was explaining that concept to me. I wasn't around when that concept was in there, but it was interesting.
It's really nice, and I think it's, as a teacher, it makes you feel like you're trusted as a professional, and, everybody knows people are in more than our contract time, so just have that flexibility to come in when it works for you, as opposed to you have to be here these 4 days at the end of the school year. So it's-
I don't have any questions,
I got
so
one more question, sorry.
because I'd sure like to make a motion here before too long, so.
Okay, real
Ken's
quick,
gonna turn
but
it
when they
over.
have those flex days where you were calling at the beginning, are they in the school, or is it that you do it on your own?
Wouldn't have to be. They may elect to be there the 17th, but maybe they put a day in July. They spent the morning doing mandatory online trainings, went into their classroom in the afternoon. That would fulfill one of those days, so.
You could fill an entire day doing the online trainings. just
Well,
based
I guess
on
I'm
the-
just wondering, and I don't know what they're doing, but I just like, do we people have their own plans, so we know they're doing it and their certification, so that it's not just people, and I'm not saying they would do this, but that we know that they're doing what they need to do, or what they're catching up with, whatever, or,
I think I understand your question. We have had conversations
like
with
accountability,
the
like they're
building
doing,
principals.
yeah.
So we have explained to them that teachers need to document that time, and they need to document that with their principals, so that
Okay.
we can go back and just for bookkeeping purposes, know that that time was fulfilled. I wanna go back to what Lynn said though, trusting our professionals. So the approach that I personally would take if I went back in time as a building principal, I would say this, and 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 this needs to be done. These would be great things to do during those flex days. So when somebody turns in, okay, here's where I worked, I worked this day, and this day, the expectation is all that stuff is done. And if it's not done, then the principal would come back and say, wait a minute, I was under the impression that your ACES training would be completed. You said that in this documentation. So we need to hold people accountable, because that's, those are contracted days. But at the same time, as Lynn said, there's so much more. And we're pretty confident that those days are gonna get.
But we don't have to
Mike.
have formal documentation because of the
Well-
contracts or anything.
No.
Okay.
No, and my goal with those flex days, two things. One, I want staff to feel trusted, and two, I don't want to create a new complicated system for principals to have to manage either. So I think, to me, it's a fairly low bar in terms of documentation.
But legally, it's a low bar, or
I don't think there's any
contractually, or,
legal
I
requirement.
don't,
Okay.
there's not a contractual issue. They're going to be doing something on
Okay.
these days. It's a work day, and actually, the end of the year, this year, I hope to be able to have some flexibility with staff, because now we're 6 days in the year right now with snow
That was
days.
gonna be my
So,
next question is, what are we gonna do at the
Yeah,
end of the year this
so,
year, because we need.
that's, I guess, separate conversation from this, but even when the board approved that calendar last year with the 4 days at the end of the year, there was discussion about flexibility when that was approved, so.
I have just a quick question before we move. When they talked about that sixth grade orientation, that's not something that needs to be on the calendar before we
Nothing was
approve that?
decided on that.
Nothing was decided.
Okay, I'm just,
I think that was more talk
If we're
with Art
bringing them-
and,
Yeah,
They had
the
talked
next
about
steps
bringing
for
them in.
Christy was gonna be talking to her staff to see their ideas about it, and then I suggested she call the Department of Ed. I don't know that,
I mean, if they end up adding that day or just having the sixth grade, does that need to be on the calendar?
possibly, it just depends which way we go. That may be an extra day beyond this.
So we can amend it?
Yeah, absolutely, this is a
Okay.
board-approved calendar, and,
Okay.
and the board can come back and,
Okay.
and change it.
The thing you have to be conscious of there, and it's not by any means an obstacle, but the hours are kind of the compelling factor. So if you're suggesting that we would have sixth graders come in and seventh and eighth graders would not come into school that day,
I'm not suggesting anything, I just knew that
What
she
she
had
had
that
talked about.
conversation and it wasn't, nothing was resolved yet. And
is
so I
that what
wanted,
is that what she suggested, Lori?
Yeah.
was one of them.
She was gonna have the
You were
seventh,
gone.
eighth
I
grade
think you were
teachers
gone
there,
to a
though. Yeah.
Yeah.
meeting or
She was gonna have the
something.
seventh, eighth grade teachers be there and participate in some way in all of it.
What that would mean then is our total hours would
Right.
be adjusted downward.
Right.
Well, that's a question
So-
she's supposed to be
yeah, I
checking
don't
with
think
the
it was
Department of
really
Ed on.
well baked.
Oh, I'm
And I-
just making sure we can change it.
Yeah,
We
you
can? Okay.
I'm
Question
fairly
answered.
confident. What I know is that we have to factor the lowest common denominator, so the least amount of hours
Okay.
in any building, regardless of what that building is, that's our hourly count.
Yeah.
So we have to be conscious of that, and I don't think that would be the middle school, because the middle school typically has more hours due to the bus transfer. But those are some of the things, there's levels of complexity there that we have to get into that's not quite as easy as, let's just do this.
Okay. And she is looking at it, Mr. Keller just told me that, he just checked in with her today, and she is looking into that hours issue, and has got an answer.
So, but we can come back, right?
Yeah.
And discuss this if we decide we're gonna do the sixth grade thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, if
And
that
then
would impact the
Go for
calendar,
it,
you
Ken, I think
certainly
as long as
can.
we can come back to it.
10 minutes
Well, so we
later.
can't come back to it unless we get out of it. So to get out of it, I'm gonna move that we approve this marvelous calendar for next year.
I second it.
Okay, motion made by Ken to approve the calendar.
The marvelous
as is.
calendar.
The marvelous.
Marvelous.
Yeah, I would like this
Marvelous,
to
yeah.
reflect marvelous talent.
Yeah.
Thanks for your work. Lee.
And I think
Thank you.
this is
Have
great
we
that we
voted?
are working together.
Did we vote, Lori? Did we vote?
Not yet.
Seconded by Donna. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I just
Any
wanna
opposed?
make the statement, I think it's great that we have the handbook committee working on this in a collaborative effort to
Yeah.
come up with the best calendar possible,
So the next thing is the year-round, is that kind of
Next board meeting, you'll have
Yep.
year-round.
the, okay.
So kudos to you guys and Ron, thank you. I think it's great you guys get involved and help.
Good process. Yeah, but-
Thank you.
There's not a lot
As
of
long as nobody
options.
shot anybody or anything.
They kind of force you into things here. All the rules.
Okay, board curriculum committee report, next.
Yeah, we met on the 9th and kind of went over two questions. The one was teacher leadership and compensation plan. Talked about how it rewards teachers when they learn from each other, and retaining teachers is one of our big focus. How we can keep them retained in collaboration with each other with an end goal of student achievement. So we looked into like facilitative coaching. And some of our teachers have been through this training, and so they kind of, as a way to help maybe some of the newer teachers into our district or the newer teachers into their career, kind of as like more of a mentor. And so they work through the Jim Knight research cycle, right? And that it looks basically as you identify something, you learn from it, and then you improve, and you just continue to go through that with 70% of the time, you're with this other teacher, really working side by side with them on trying to improve outcomes in different areas. We talked a lot about, Stacey Evans is the mentor coordinator for the first year teacher support. Because that was one question that when we talk about retention, are we helping these newer students or newer teachers into our district along? And so Stacey kind of takes them under and works with them kind of on the Wednesdays.
Do we have problems with retention, or, I mean, I know it's good to be proactive, but are we seeing issues that we're addressing, or we're just being proactive?
That's actually one of the state's goals for all the districts in the state of Iowa, is to work on teacher retention. And so they monitor that not only for teachers who might be leaving your district, but even if they change buildings. Unfortunately, too, it does count against us, even if somebody retires. So this next year with early retirement, we might see a little dip in our percentages in that area. But that's just an overall goal for the state. Because we're trying to provide these enhanced career opportunities, is how the state words that. By having these leadership positions, they're wanting to retain teachers because they can be leaders in many different roles and variety of positions. So,
Does it count against us if they go from one building to the other building?
that's considered that you're not retaining them there. I know some
Even
of
if
it
they're
just.
trying for a better position or something?
Yeah, because it might be saying that maybe they don't get into rating whether that was a suitable placement or not. And again, it just goes into our report to the state. We just have that goal that we want to retain our teachers at high levels, so.
That doesn't influence any of our decisions to move a teacher, though?
To do what?
That it would count against the district? Like, if a teacher's wishing to go to this and we feel like that's the best person for that job, we would do that regardless of it?
Right, evaluation and determining transfers is completely separate.
Okay.
And we use our own teachers as leaders, and they actually can apply for these positions on our HR website, and they do get a stipend for being kind of a mentor or a trainer for some of these other ones. So that was kind of what we talked about, teacher leadership and compensation plan, and you can find kind of all the goals and stuff on the Department of Education website. And then the second half, we talked about social emotional competencies. Want to take that one away?
If I can see it.
Take it away, Sugar.
So the 5 social emotional learning competencies were self-awareness, self-management, what's that word?
Social.
Awareness,
You wrote that
social
twice.
awareness.
Oh, social awareness, sorry, social, yeah, okay. Relationship skills, collaborative and large groups, and responsible decision-making. And those are just things they work on.
And I think that, and then that conversation kind of went into a little bit of, brought us back to kind of the mental health perspective when you look at like social awareness with emotions and the growth mindset and responsible decision-making. And so we looked kind of into more of that, like and,
The
okay.
self-management was more stress management
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
part of it.
We talked about the social, was this all, I have social climate transformation grant.
And so the state of Iowa received a grant, which then, I would say propelled them into this work to look at developing social emotional competencies for the state. So these 5 that are listed here are the ones that are under review by the state currently, and they hope to possibly have those adopted by the end of March. So going into next year, schools will be taking a look at how are they working these types of frameworks of supports in for students. And so some of our buildings are looking at the CHAMPS model currently through Safe and Civil Schools, just taking a look at what are the frameworks there per grade or per age level of appropriateness that might fit the needs of Indianola.
And I think that's how we then got into this, the mental health perspective was, you know, as our committee goes on mental health, how many of those social competencies will help us form our mental health protocol or help the committee, so.
Okay, moving on to.
Oh, I have a question under this subject. We got a note from Art that the test scores had returned, came back last week.
Yeah, the school
All of that,
performance
and-
profiles, yep.
I haven't seen a copy of those yet.
They are, you can find any of them online. I don't have a typed up copy other than, I just went through and clicked through each one and wrote down what their, you know, whether it's commendable
We
or
don't-
high performing.
So we didn't get a document or something?
There's 2 pieces to this. The
Okay.
school performance profiles is a comprehensive report for each school building. And all of the data within that, part of that contains your conditions for learning, which is related more to students feeling, physical safety, engagement, as a caring adult. So that's one piece in the school profile. I do have, online, as Art said, you can click into there and see all of the different components for each school. I do know where our ratings are currently and kind of how the point systems went, if you want me to touch base on that.
Well,
Here.
we're kind of after what our test results, I mean, what we're
Yeah.
here.
Well,
I mean, if it needs an explanation, if I just go click on something and I see it there, I just didn't realize that.
Well, I think that's part of me and Art learning too, is how much do I take through, like I was thinking through our next board curriculum committee, that would be part of our discussion there. I gave Art a summary of all of the buildings too, not knowing what part gets
Okay.
sent out to you guys,
The
but
point is, and what we said is, this is open to the public as of this week.
yes.
So we should really kind of know what it is in case we get
Do
questions.
you have the numbers handy that
I
you?
do, yep.
Okay.
Taking a look at, for example, the high school and the middle school had slight increases in what you would call their rating. They're both in the acceptable category because they give you a kind of a category of where you're at within your point system, so they are both still acceptable. Irving made about 5 to 6 points of an increase, and so they increased their category from being commendable to high. So that was a great growth to see that from Irving. Whittier went from being in the high category last year, they decreased about 5 points, so they are now in the commendable rating. Wilder had just a very insignificant point increase. They are still commendable at this point, but they are now targeted for IEPs, meaning that the student subpopulation that have individual education plans, they are not showing the growth that they need to for their learning. So that building will now have that targeted label, in a sense, for 3 years. That'll be tracked then and looked at that point. Emerson had a slight decrease of about 3 points, but they are still in the commendable range that they were last year.
I have a question.
What does commendable come in at? Is that like?
That's
the
kind of in the
point
middle.
scale?
Mhm.
Okay.
Because we didn't have any that were, trying to think of the other.
High is after
Yeah.
commendable.
Yeah, high performing is the highest, and then commendable, and then acceptable and then you get into,
Needs improvement and priority
Yeah.
are the two lowest, and we don't have any buildings in those categories.
So I had a question. So I know Wilder has 31 kids at a level 1, 17 at a level 2, and 4 at a level 3. I'm taking that as the school that's got the highest amount of special needs with IPs
Out of the elementary levels.
out of the elementaries.
Ron would be able to speak to that more clearly possibly than I would, but once you get over.
I mean, I'm just
looking
I'm just looking at scores, so that school's got all these kids, if they have all those kids,
It's actually measuring how much learning growth that's occurring for them. the
Right.
Expected learning growth, and if they aren't increasing their growth at the rate that's expected, that's when they would take a look at that. You also have to have 20 or more students in that subcategory of having IEPs for it to show up in your accountability ratings.
So Lori, the
So-
answer to your question, I think generally speaking, yes, but not necessarily. Because those weightings are determined by a number of factors. Assistive technology, for instance, would weigh in on that. Behavior needs. So you may have an associate who's assigned to you to help you with that. That doesn't necessarily reflect your ability academically, it's just a level of support that's required.
oh, no, I'm not there, I'm just, my question was Emerson and Whittier and, I missed one. Wilder, I know what Wilder has. I'm just wondering if these other schools have this many kids that that are either level 1, 2, or 3. I'm just asking, I mean, we discussed, I was out at Wilder and we discussed some of this, and so I was just curious.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but what I will tell you is Irving has far fewer, just because they don't have the specialized programs. Whittier has fewer because it's a 2-section building, so proportionally it doesn't have as many. Emerson is probably the closest, and I couldn't really distinguish between Emerson and Wilder, but whereas Wilder has the behavior classroom, Emerson has the functional classroom. So there are a number, every kid in that classroom is a level 3. So it would probably be between Emerson and Wilder in terms of which, who had the greatest weighting.
I was just curious,
I mean, way back when we were building Wilder, there was thought behind, we had the ability to kind of design some classrooms to handle stuff like that we didn't have in the other buildings, so.
oh, there's a
Well, I know
definite
they
facility
just-
component to it,
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
mean, there's definitely,
I know
there
they
was
just
thought
moved
behind
one
that.
today from Irving to Wilder, that, for whatever reason, into the special needs. I'm not sure what level, but that's what, I mean, I was just wondering when you're talking test scores, what we're looking at, when we have that many kids, what are we looking at as far as comparison of being targeted, or,
But you're saying each one, it's more like, are they growing?
each individual
Regardless of-
special needs student has to be showing growth.
Yeah.
These aren't necessarily like test scores the kids are taking, like a test. These are more,
It's based off the Iowa statewide student assessment, the ISASP.
okay.
So those results from last spring in
Okay.
2019 were used as a part of this calculation.
Okay.
And we were distributed those. We got 10 sheets on that, didn't we, if I remember correctly, at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So is there still something else to come out still?
No, this is that main
This was the end.
report. And so in there, when you get this, their points that they assign, they compare you also to the state averages. It also factors in attendance, the percentage of students who were tested. The high school, their calculation includes graduation rate. It will start to include post-secondary, college and career readiness. There's a whole factor of things, and they're not weighted the same from the elementary to middle school to high school. That weighting even changes. So it's more worthwhile to get into the actual district or the state's website and be able to look at the overall data and the subgroups, and you can get into the in-depth pieces too. And that was a part of what the SIAC looked at here this past week.
So we should be able to understand that if I would go on, I should be able to understand what each one of those are then.
I would think
I would
so.
look
It's
decipher
pretty
it.
user-friendly once you've looked at those
You
pieces.
can click and drill down and see what each one of those factors that go into the weighting, they'll define it, and you can go in by school and see how they score in each of those areas.
Right.
I mean, it's a few clicks, but you can go pretty deep,
Okay.
so.
So within that report, though, are you able to identify contributing factors that may have led to the increase and/or decrease in the points for each school?
Yes.
You can do a comparison from year to year. So this is the second year in which that has been a report. But it also stresses to you that don't use solely that report. You need to take a look at that and then seek out additional data resources to get a better picture of what it is. They don't want you to solely go on just the one assessment.
Yeah,
Right, so as a administration, have you been able to look at that and then identify, well, for example, Irving increased by 5 points, and based on the growth and the data, we can determine that this, and this might have had something to do with it? I mean, is that something that has been looked at? Or vice versa, if a school has decreased, has that been looked at as contributing factors which might have led to that?
These
Yeah.
just came out.
Okay.
So, it just came out that last Tuesday. It was supposed to come out the Monday.
It's supposed to come out the 20th, got released the 21st, released to the public the 27th. Yeah, I think that is the process. You're always, and it's not always a clean cause and effect, but you're always looking for what can we do to move practice, what do we think was successful, why does this area seem to be declining?
That's the plan anyway, as you dissect it further. then.
Yeah, definitely,
All right.
yep.
So what's target mean?
They look at it from a 3-year average too. So they won't just take it year by year. They start doing some averaging of those statistics.
Could you work on something like that and maybe present it next board meeting, like showing us, maybe answering those types of questions at all that we've been asking and stuff?
Yeah, I had shown it
That
to
way
the
you have
board
more time to
subcommittee
prepare it.
earlier this year as to what that site looks like and those pieces to it, but.
What's target mean? What's that mean for you? What do we? what-
So for IEP students, that particular targeted category means that you're scoring within the lowest 5% of the schools in the state in the growth of those students compared to the other school districts.
So what's our plan to get out of that target, to work on getting that up? I mean, do we have a plan? Is there,
Well,
I mean-
I presume that they're always working on getting better and making the plan.
well, I understand
What
that,
they're
but
trying to say is, the results that they're dealing with on this cumulative thing just showed up last week. So.
Right, but do
The
we-
principal's gotta digest everything and.
So for an example, if I'll go back to my middle school role. When the middle school was targeted in that area last year, the special education team was brought together and we did kind of a gap analysis to say, where are the areas that you feel are blocking us from making the growth that we need to? And they had outlined, I would say it was probably 5 different categories, all the way from, it was curriculum a concern, training, is it something within our scheduling and the system of how we serve students? And when we went through all of those, the piece that came out from them, especially in the area of math, which is one we were looking at, was curriculum. And so the teachers then, we got onto the site, and there's a comparison tool that you can use within there, and looked up where are the highest performing districts for serving special education students. So we started taking a look at what curriculum are they using. Some of them went and did visits this year to a couple other districts, along with instructional coaches, bringing it back. And so Christy and I are having conversations now about how is our service model, it's not working, and so how do we flip that in some way where we saw it at another district? With the 6-8 math selection committee today or this year for math, the special education teachers, we invited them in. We said, you're not completely a part of the adoption right now, but we'll do what we can to do that funding to get materials that's needed. So they've been a part of this selection process for 6th through 8th grade math so far this year, so we can take a look at what other pieces of curriculum are available to you there also. So those are some of those things that we've been working on since last year for the middle school. Also taking a look at, well, what does that mean when you're co-teaching versus pulling kids out to give them extra direct instruction? We don't want them to miss core. So there's quite a lot of variables that you have to look at systemically, and that's an example of what's been taking place at the middle school so far.
Good. That's informative. I like to hear that, so we know.
And I would say too, on the hiring end, and Ron is kind of that director of special education, helps to take a look too at that budgeting and hiring and roster numbers. And in the last couple years, 2 positions have been rehired back that we didn't have before. And that's not always the answer, right? We have to take a look at that instructional piece too, but we want the teachers to have high-quality materials also, so.
We actually hired 2 back and added 1 more at Emerson, so we have 3 more special education teachers now than we had a year ago.
At the middle school, or all
Uh,
District-wide.
District-wide, yep.
We feel it's sufficient.
I go back to what Katie Williams said. We would always like to add more staff. If we had a windfall and money was available, I think we could keep additional staff busy, there's no question. Now, the thing that's challenging sometimes is there's kind of an ebb and flow. So in some programs, you could go a year where you have very low numbers, and then the next year have very high numbers. And that's just a product of the kids that you get. So we've had, for instance, we've had situations in our middle school behavior room where we've had 2 or 3 kids. The year prior, we had 12 or 13, which is an outrageous number for a program like that. So it's kind of a year-to-year proposition.
Okay.
I would say, to answer your questions directly as I can, I think it's very sufficient in some buildings and some programs, and probably not sufficient in others. But that could change again next year.
Okay. Any other questions on this area before we move on? We better get going. The SIAC committee report.
Yeah, so on January 20th, the SIAC committee met, and the minutes there reflect how a portion of the night was when the committee heard a presentation from Jim Rupp. At least a minimum of every 3 years, the SIAC has given input on the district's wellness plan. That doesn't simply include nutrition. It includes what we're doing for physical activity, how we're promoting wellness, what are we doing within our curriculum to make sure that we're staying abreast with the requirements from the state. And they were given the opportunity to look through and read that plan before the meeting, but then also the point of it was to be able to give input on recommendations, because these were goals the buildings have set, and there's not a requirement to do them. We're just continually trying to improve in all areas. And the bulleted points that are listed there were the main 3 that were standing out from the input that was given from the committee. One of them on recommendation that if it could be possible to install water bottle filling stations at any of the schools that don't have them. We talked somewhat about how at the middle school, at least, that started because of grants that we were writing at the middle school, and I think some of the other buildings got them in some ways. There might be 2 elementaries that don't have them currently, and I know Bernie Brick was looking into that for what buildings do have those and don't. Recommendation to look more strongly at incorporating flexible seating options. I know in some of the classrooms in the district that had been started, looking at those types of options, but continuing forward with that.
What does that mean, flexible seating options?
So instead of how we're sitting here, all at desks and all the same seats, have either more comfortable lounge chairs, cafeteria tables,
Some
having
high-top tables like you might see in the lounge area.
options where kids can stand during the classroom, so it kind of suits their needs for them. And then also, many of the schools incorporate classroom movement when possible. You just call them move-its, so instead of just turning and talking with somebody, it might be, please stand and talk, or we're just gonna make sure there's some movement and physical activity, because we know when we're sedentary for long periods of time, you can lose some of your engagement too. But they had commented on that at the elementary levels, when they have orchestra and band classes, that might be held over recess time. If those schools could focus especially on those days to put in move-its into the classrooms, so. The second part of that evening was when they were looking at the Iowa School Performance Profile reports from last year, because the newly ones hadn't been released yet as of that time, which is unusual. Usually last year they came out in December, and they're wanting to try and get those done even earlier. But since ISASP is new, they came out even later this year. And I had put together just a summary report of these different varieties of types of data for them to look at, and to give input on were there areas that they'd want additional attention spent to those things, ideas and concerns. And so I listed there some of the main ones that had been listed for input. Again, ensuring that our younger students at the elementaries understand what emotional safety means. So when we look at those conditions for learning reports, emotional safety is one of the categories. So if that comes out of looking into their reports for that, if that's one that's standing out, then, which it was on some of those buildings that they were looking at, the buildings could then gear some action plans towards that area, was recommended. And I did notice the state is now putting out toolkits that principals can use in their buildings to help facilitate that process. Our English language learners, when we were taking a look at that overall, they were reporting more of a lack of connection than our other students. And there were some suggestions there, just taking a look at roster sizes, how can we encourage them to be involved in extracurricular activities, really reaching out and making sure that we're connecting with that subpopulation from that data. Other things, again, taking a look at vertical alignment of skills. We know that, if they're not learning it at an age level when we would expect, it affects them as they continue to move along. So that was kind of a curriculum one we could look at. And I think that was important too, because we have teachers there, and they're seeing that could be a need and be something that would be helpful. We also looked at the attendance rates at the buildings, and even though we do have a current process for addressing chronic absenteeism, it's not always successful. And so they were just encouraged that let's keep looking for ways to keep addressing that to get our kids in school. It might not always work when we have, the school liaison there, or the school resource officer, or the contracts that are written for contracts. I mean, they do a lot, but it was kind of like, don't give up. Let's keep working on it for our kids. And then again, student mental health needs came up. And this was something that was shared by a parent, I believe, as their opinion was that the mental health needs, and if there's negative student-to-student interactions, that could be impacting school performance and attendance, which, that's kind of, we can see how that would happen, but there wasn't a specific piece of data that was reviewed that was showing that one.
Going back to your bullet point number, the first one, under what you were just referring to, the emotional safety for conditions of learning, did, with these new ones that just came out, do we see any of our schools that would show high where kids are feeling unsafe? Any of our schools here?
I couldn't recall that
Okay.
off the top of my head for that. But that would be an example, as the principal's looking into theirs now and working with their staffs, and we'll pull those pieces out, so. Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the HR committee report.
Go ahead.
Let's see, the three of us were there. Okay, sorry. To date, 22 certified staff members. Yeah, has that gone up at all since that? Okay, so we're at 22. Okay, have till the end of the week then to get that in, if they're wanting that last benefit.
So nothing's changed then?
No, not since this.
We approved one today.
We did.
Over 75% of these positions have been filled for next year.
Okay, yeah,
That's fine.
that Kaios is,
I'm just saying, we do have some here for retirements.
Oh,
Two
okay.
though,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Do we intend, I didn't think to ask this then, do we intend to fill all those positions that are being
yes.
retired?
Yes.
Okay, one way or another, we'll be filling one. So we won't be down teachers then next year.
We're actually getting pretty close in terms of filling those. We interviewed all day today and last Thursday, and we've hired an additional 4 people. We didn't have time to get them on the consent agenda for the day, so we're
Okay.
getting pretty close.
Okay. Then we moved into, let's see.
In fact,
Associates.
we'll have,
Associate retention.
just to know, we'll have a little more FTE next year than this year, because industrial tech went from 0.5 to 1.0, and then we had a social studies position at the high school we didn't refill this year
Increasing.
because of
Because
some
of the
timing
curriculum.
with the curriculum.
Yeah.
So we'll actually have, more FTE next year.
Lot of good position.
Then we went into some associate retention strategies. discussed recruiting, hiring, and trying to retain associates. That's been on my mind a lot. I'm assuming it's also been on a lot of yours as well. We understand that that's a problem, not only in our district, but also statewide, and I don't know, maybe nationwide. I have no idea if it's probably everywhere. Some contributing factors were, of course, the job market is doing great, so we don't have as big a pool to pull from. However, I mean, I think we have to think outside the box and figure out, you know, we can just continue to say, well, this is the problem, or we can figure out how do we tackle this and make sure we have adequate associates in positions, because I'm assuming the teachers need them there to help with those students, and that's what we've heard.
And that's something today I tackled when I was out at Wilder and talking to some of the associates, and we had brought up at that meeting, benefits or hours, and the ones I talked to, it was more hours than it was benefits. And one did say, you know, her comment was, and I couldn't answer it, I just said, you know, that's something I need to ask, cause I wasn't sure. I thought we could, but I wasn't sure. She said, well, could we get more hours and not take the benefits? Can they turn down the I know,
Yeah, they could turn them
I
down.
mean, my daughter turned down her benefits at her new job, but
They could, and that's one of the things we discussed at our meeting. And I think I was pretty clear, I'm in favor, if we could at all afford it, of adding benefits, but not necessarily for the sake of the benefits, because
Right.
I've heard that same thing, that people need more hours. The problem is, as a result of the Affordable Care Act,
Yeah, you have to.
we have to limit the number of hours, or we have to offer benefits. So just in terms of planning, if we were to turn around and say, open it up and say, okay, we'd like you to serve 37.5 hours like everyone else, that would help us address some of our shortage areas, because we would have to hire fewer people. The problem with that is, we have to be prepared to provide them benefits to be in compliance with the Affordable Care Act. And that cost is upwards of $1 million.
On the current insurance that we have, yes.
So I
but we
think-
could offer them a different kind of insurance, right, instead of what the teachers have?
We have 3 different plans.
You know,
Well-
there is I'm sorry, man, interrupting.
No, go ahead.
Since that meeting, and we're kind of, on the next thing on the agenda, it's all here, you know, discussion, I think, on this subject. You know, it dawned on me, when I had talked with people, the associate wasn't benefits, it was hours. Which actually is not quite what they were trying to tell me, it was to make more money. And so we got, these are some figures I came up with, because she was talking $1 million, you know, everybody insurance. So if we have leave associates, you know, basically the same, staying under whatever it is, 32 hours a week or whatever it is, which you don't have to offer, and I just use if I had a 7-hour day and I had 7 full-time equivalents, we had a factor on that, I can't remember, 59 or 69, that'd be 490 hours a day, 177 days, takes me to about 286,000, I think I'd have to do that one again. No, that's 117 days, 186. We could give a $2 or $3 an hour raise to employees for less money than insurance. Just make the position pay more. Keep the hours under the way we do it now. I'm not proposing we do that tonight, I'm trying to say that is another way to look at it, that we could make that more of a position paying.
Well, I had this,
Just a thought.
and I had an associate say, you know, I'm supposed to clock out at this time, so I go clock out, but I come back because this child needs the assistance.
I think the teachers would say.
And she goes, it's my kid. I mean, it may not biologically be her kid, but she feels that she needs to take care of that kid, the child. And, you know, so she does that because she needs to take care of that student to get them to the point where they're, you know, where getting on the bus or whatever, so.
But she tries to keep her time under the hours.
You know, and one comment is, you know, she goes, if I go over, I get yelled at, so I just go clock out and then come back and help the student. So, you know, and I don't wanna get anybody in trouble, I just,
From
I
a
mean,
legal standpoint.
But that's what's,
I know, but we can't, I
That's
mean,
what's
we
pushing-
need to be taking care of our students, especially if that's what their IP say. And I know,
But we are, I mean, we're doing what the
We
IEP
are.
says, yeah.
And that's really problematic, Lori, because that introduces a whole level of liability. The IRS has
Right.
been clear, you cannot volunteer to do your job. So what she's doing by just kind of defying that limitation is she's exposing the district to liability.
right,
So
and I
you've
told her
gotta
that.
get with that person and say, you
Well, and I
can't
told,
do
and
this.
she doesn't do it every day, it's been a couple times she's had to do it throughout the year, and, you know, but my thing is, if we're needing them those extra 20 or 30 minutes, are we evaluating that at every school and saying, you know, really, we need this person an extra 20 or 30 minutes?
I can honestly tell you that probably there is nothing that principals spend more time on than trying to coordinate associates. It's something that they would love to not spend that amount of time on it, but given the limitations that we have, I think they are about as tight as they can possibly be in terms of, you know, monitoring and being very clear on what do we need to fulfill the minutes. And in some cases, you know, we're hiring like crazy, interviewing like crazy at least, to get those minutes covered. So I'm very confident that the principals have a very good idea of the minutes that they're required to cover. It doesn't always go smoothly because, as I think someone talked about today, there are people that become ill. We don't have a lot of subs waiting in the wings for those positions. There are different, you know, realities and needs, so it's by no means a great situation.
So so I guess, you know, give them a $2 or $3 increase or, and you said you've talked to a lot of them and it wasn't the benefits, it was more the hours, so I guess, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think anybody can have a thought on what I just said, I just threw it out of the.
I mean, I know, but I mean, you
And my
know-
figure was, I was off, there's 86,730 hours, so if you raise $3, that was at 240. I also wanted something else, I had coffee with by the way, this is regulated by the union contract, it's not something we can just, you know, do.
Right.
I met with a school board member from Norwalk and one from Johnson at the same time. They give benefits, exact same problem we have going through AIDS like you wouldn't believe, as those two board members told me, which is why I was looking for,
do you know what their pay rate is there?
What?
Do you know what their pay rate is there for those associates? Is it as low as ours?
Is that easy to
You could
get?
say it's high as ours, I don't know what it is. No, I mean, I don't know
We're one of the
what they
lowest,
do.
are we?
Well, I
Can we say
just-
that? No,
No, we're not. But the difference is in Norwalk, they can pay less because they can give more hours. So at the end of the day, and
Still
I'm not,
kinda-
I can't vouch for this, but I spoke with an associate who's since come back from Norwalk to us, and I think she told me that she may have been making a little bit less in Norwalk, but the difference in hours gave her more take-home pay. Now, I'm not gonna attest, I can't be sure of that, because that was a conversation that occurred in passing a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't looked at Norwalk's salary schedule, but I would not say that we're, you know, out of line necessarily in terms of what we're paying market-wise. At the same time, what Rob said is accurate. Unemployment is so low, that it's a worker's market. I mean, we've got people who can shop and they can find jobs, and honestly, we have people. this
We
person
just
I
have to be
talked
the
to.
ones to stand out in this area. I mean, an
Yeah.
associate's not gonna drive forever to go to
No.
work.
But I
We
kinda
have
feel
to be
like,
the ones that stand out.
this is my historian role, but I mean, it was a tough decision when Obamacare came out and the rules just changed and districts, I think, kinda struggled with it because it was so expensive. I mean, we had to cut back, but we tried to figure out a way. So I mean, it was tough decisions. But I would say the role is a tough position. So I don't know that there's a magical answer to retention. Cause I mean, it's a demanding position that, I don't know.
Do we do follow-up exit
I think
interviews
the
with?
best way to direct ourselves towards the answer is to talk to the people who are in these positions or the people that have left these positions and get their
But I'd also like to
Have
know
we
what
done a
other
survey?
districts are paying to know if we're out of line.
So if I can just interject, I have this informal information, just reaching out to the different special ed directors. There's a range, and Perry starts at $15.10. which is quite a bit
What are
higher
we
than
at
us.
exactly?
12.25.
Yeah.
or
12
Okay.
even, right?
Ames is 1165. Marshalltown is 937 to 1147.
Is that based on levels, what they're
Yeah.
working with?
So again, this is just, here's a 1341 number. Here's one that's 1493, which is quite a bit higher than us. You know, there's 11s, 12s. So it's, the number itself is not necessarily, is not out of line. The big difference is that many of the districts we're talking about offer benefits so they can work more hours.
So we offer 1225 is our lowest, our starting pay, and we go to 1430. So,
But we don't do it based on the levels they're working with,
It's years of service.
years of service.
I think we have to compare ourselves to Norwalk, Carlisle, Interstate, Martinsdale, because those are the driving distances.
I don't think so. Yes, but we also have to compare ourselves to Walmart,
Yes,
To
I
hire
agree,
me.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
I agree 100% with that.
you know, I think in that regard.
Agreed,
Um,
yeah.
You know, the cheapest figure I heard on insurance is I had private conversations with Jonna for this situation, everything, and it was $1 million up here. Somehow, down here, I was talking 400,000, you know, so, and that doesn't solve the problem, that's just the barrier. That's what made me start to think the other way about just, and it's not something that can be decided this evening, and we are kind of moving along with the meeting and doing
Would it-
many things, so.
Would it be worth the Human Resource Committee just to come up with a simple 4 or 5 question survey and send to the associates? To at least collect data?
I think,
To just say,
I think
hey,
it'd be worthwhile.
all of them want more hours, all of them want more pay, and then we can continue that discussion, but one of those
Would you
simple,
like more
simple.
pay?
I won't-
I did hear associates
I mean-
today too say they do it because they love working with the kids. I mean, there's a connection there with those kids that
Right,
you,
but,
you can't put a price on.
well, you can, cause
Well,
that's retention.
You can, but I'm just saying, some of them stay, and I think I know one of those you're talking about, she had made a comment that I ran into is, she came back because of the love of the kids here.
That's what,
So-
I think the answer is deeper than the compensation. Compensation
Yeah.
is good, but, the answer is much deeper than that, and
Let's figure
most
out.
research will prove that people sometimes stay in positions for less compensation for, you know, other factors, and so there's obviously a problem that's been identified, and I think, it's a complex answer, but our best bet, I think, is to reach out to the people that we can get the best answers from to move forward.
I think if we do a survey, then we're all asking the same questions, you know? Because I think sometimes if we all go into our own schools and we may not be asking the same questions, then the information could be all.
Well,
over
and
the
yeah, and it
place.
depends, you know, with whom you connect,
Right,
you know, and how the questions are asked and everything else, so.
So maybe the ones that aren't on HR, they could email Rob any questions they would like to see on the form?
I'd also, I don't know if it's easy to find, is there's any kind of way to know, what average retention is? To know what we're up against, like, we could do all we want, but if this is kind of a fluid group of people in general, then, you know, our standard shouldn't be 100%. We shouldn't think that it's gonna be, whatever we do, it's gonna be 100%. It's just gonna be, this is the type of position, maybe someone does it till they get a teaching job if they're out of college, or, you know, it's a stair-step thing. And I don't, some people do, some people don't, but on the whole, what kind of characteristics does this position have? Because I just don't know that, you know, are we trying to provide, I wouldn't call, I'm not trying to, but you know, like, is it a career position, like this is all you do, this, you're gonna do this for life, you're gonna have benefits, you're gonna live off of it, or is it kind of a stair-step position? I mean, I think that's a tough decision, but I think that's kind of what we're struggling with is, there's certain things that we, like it's $1 million if we give healthcare, okay, is that the best value for the district? The economy's tight, so maybe where we were able to fill positions in and out, we aren't right now. So does that go away in 2 years if the economy changes? I don't know. But I think I'd like to kind of, if there's a way to understand the characteristics.
Is that a thing we could look at, Ron, that would tell us that?
I'd have to think about that. you some time.
I just
to
don't wanna set a
process
standard that we
but-
can't get
I
and
mean,
like
just,
spend a ton of
I
money.
mean, that is
I
a
think
good
it's
question.
important. I think
Yeah.
that's an important
I
factor.
agree.
Consider also your survey, you're surveying the people that are still here, not the people
Right,
that
I don't, I
have
mean, I think the survey will be
So
interesting,
that'll
but it's
be-
not gonna give us, to me, it's not
Right.
gonna give me all the information. I feel I need to kinda set what I think our standard should be. Cause you asked me, I want more money at my job, you know, I mean, I don't wanna work as many hours and get paid the same amount of money or more than I do right now. I mean, that's, you're gonna get answers, they want more hours, they want more pay. I get it, I mean, that's kind of, we could ask, but people might say they don't want benefits, but you gotta give it to everyone, and so you've got this unknown, depending on who you hire, they'll likely take benefits, so you've gotta assume everyone takes benefits when you
I will say
budget.
that we meet, the special ed directors meet, and the group, it's primarily from the metro area, but there are some outliers, you know, for instance, Marshalltown. The last time we met, there was not a person in the room that said that associate hiring and retention is not a problem for them. So I don't suggest that that's a reason that we shouldn't address this, but it's a problem in every single district that I'm aware
Yeah,
of.
Do we feel like this is a problem in every single school in Indianola schools?
Well, there's a
Or
whole
are there some
demographic,
schools that
yeah.
feel
Yeah,
There's
like, hey, we don't have an issue, we're doing great?
No, there's a demographic of people that have been associates in these buildings for a long time. They wanna work in town, they want hours that they can be with their kids, they love working with kids, and they just love the job. They don't necessarily
Yeah.
need to make a lot of money, and
Right.
some of them don't care if they have, you know, benefits because their husband has them. So I don't know what we can do to, you know, address that part of it. Then you have a whole demographic of a bunch of kids that are just getting out of college that are going, well, I'm gonna do this until I can get a better job. And so it's, you know, right, I think we need to address it, absolutely, but I don't know if we can solve it completely because
Sure.
we're not gonna have a bunch of moms, you know, that, I mean, where I work, I worked at Whittier and Irving both, and we had associates that have been there a long time in both those buildings, a long time, so
but I think you get back to like, what's our goal? Is our goal, you know, are we trying to have career associates? I mean, that's kind of, or is it not, you know?
And as you don't have control over who's applying for your job, so you have to make the job kind of attractive to people to apply to maybe wanna stay here, you know, to do
What?
it, and, so I don't know if
I
that's the
think-
pay issue or what, but I mean, we're still gonna get some of those girls that are just out of college or men or whoever, and.
would be nice to see if Ron can think about that for a while and then get back to us, and then do the survey, at least get their feedback, and then take the two and then dig into it and see what we think. If that's what's going on, or is it,
Past associates too.
yeah, past associates?
Right, I agree, I'm just.
I
Okay.
actually had another thought in this area, which will match the one I just said. I don't see why our associates, and there's others like bus drivers, have to suffer for a snow day. They don't make any money. Our administrators make money, we make the same. Our teachers, you know, make the same. We've budgeted for it. It's an act of God, it's nothing anybody can, you know, contribute. So I'm gonna throw that for people to think about. I can't decide it tonight, I know that. But I take seriously responsibility being an employer. It's not their fault. And there's no way they can make up the time and money. You know, it's a day, we're not adding another day sometime or something like that. It's not, for something to think about.
So, more research to be done?
I don't know, that's all the thoughts I've had.
You're ready for bed, right?
Okay, so, moving on to E1, monthly financial reports.
Actually, it's substitute pay comparison.
Oh, let me skip.
We're just,
Yeah, we did it, we
We
did
kinda
it,
skipped around.
we talked about
Yeah.
substitute pay too, and what we've typically done, you know, every few years, it seems like we have bumped that, you know, $5 to stay competitive. We are still competitive.
HR.
This is another one of those areas, everybody is short of subs. Just, it doesn't matter where you're at, it's an issue, so. I don't know if if we had any huge revelations during that conversation, other just to kind of show the committee the numbers that we are still kind of in the mix there competitively, especially our long-term sub rate. But, that, you know, it's probably time, possibly for next year, to bump that from 120 to 125. But that's not the primary thing that's making a sub decide. whether or not they're gonna sub either. So, it's more just kind of staying in step with the market. So.
All right, now we'll move on to the financial reports, if I'm looking at the correct order there.
As we look at the balance sheet, you see both this year and last year for November. A couple of things I'd like to point out. Management, we're increasing, you've seen that that's an increase due to, as we're trying to do this early retirement, and hold our balance the same. Local option is up quite a bit, but we're trying to save for our projects that are coming this summer, and then also a future building for our auxiliary services. PEPAL, we're again saving as well. We spent a lot of it, but a year ago, we had spent most of it because of the projects we had. The other one that I really want you to notice is our self-insurance fund. Okay, this is our first year with this. We will be getting our rates for next year around the 1st of February. But if you notice that $1 million number, when we budgeted last year, that number wasn't in. So as we process through this year, we'll need to amend our budget for the GEO bond and the bonds that we refunded. We'll have to do an amendment for that. But we'll also do an amendment for our, encompass the self-insurance. Because if you go to the next report, the thing that sticks out the most in the next report is in the 42% that we're at right now for the support services. That is directly related to that self-insurance number. So we're, really, if you went month by month by month, we'd be at 41.6%, and that's already at 42.46. So we will need to amend our budget in those two line items, the support services and the other, which is where the bond stuff happens. Which is, when we do an amendment, it's just because we're going to spend more. It doesn't mean that there'll be a tax increase or anything like that. So as you look at that, that is the biggest piece there. So not even knowing how that was going to work last year when we were processing through that, because we already pretty much had our budget in place before we completely finished the online, or the insurance process as we updated. So
So are you saying like we've contributed premiums of 1.4 million and we have claims of $1 million?
Yeah, so we're at 365,000 to the good right now.
And that somehow makes,
Because it's an expenditure, that when you look at that the second
Yeah.
certified budget comparison, that is, when you look at the instruction, support services, non-instruction programs and other, that's all funds together. That's general fund through food service, through all of them. So they all kind of intertwine, which is confusing. But that is the exact issue there. So I'm watching that. We will, as we we really need to wait till towards the end of our, probably in May we'll amend, because then we'll know where we stand with that budget, or we'll be close at least, so we may try to fudge up just to make sure that we're within our budget as we look for the auditors. So, any questions on that?
does it kind of close up at the end of the school year and start again? The insurance part?
I think what we are going to see now, and this is, again, I'm a novice in this piece of it, but, okay, every January you start over with your deductibles. So we should see, is what I think, a dip as those start to get processed. So, because there'll be more skin in the game from the
More out of pocket before they get to the claim.
from the employee. So that's what I'm thinking, but again, we're supposed to meet.
Do we have a carryover, like a deductible carryover, because that
We
might
don't
soften
have
that,
that.
we don't have deductible carryover?
So-
If that hiccups too much, you might ask about that, because a lot of companies do a deductible carryover.
Yeah, and that's a lot of times
Yeah.
when you start slicing and dicing benefits, that's one of the things that goes away, and most places, a lot of places have gone away from
Oh,
it,
okay.
which sadly.
Well, I get that.
It was nice when you use that, you know.
Right.
but-
Right, okay.
So that's where we are financially. In our cash flow, you can see that we're up a little bit and we'll continue to go up. We'll be starting to get our open enrollment revenues in the next month or two, so, which is a nice start.
I can take the finance committee report.
We need to approve our
Oh,
monthly
sorry.
financials first.
I move approval of the financial reports.
Motion made by Karen,
Second.
seconded by Ben. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 7-0. Okay, Carolyn.
Yeah, and the financing, are we talking about in more detail later in the packet? I can't remember.
Here, we're talking more about, we just got the timeline from him like Friday. So, I think we just need to discuss it here to know how we need to go forward.
Okay. So basically, the district has done a great job over the years, looking at anything that's callable and refinancing and saving money over the long run. The numbers seem big, but they're spread out, but it's all still positive, it does add up, so we knew we kind of had this other little piece that possibly, if rates kept going down, could become something that's viable even after the cost of refinancing at a lower rate would still be some savings that we could lock in for the district. And so that's what that's what we're talking about. I'll let Jonna go through the details, but it was like, how much in savings?
2.1.
Yeah.
2.1 or 2.3. And that's in future, 2.195. So
That was like 59% of future interest or something, right? It was significant.
because number one, you're collapsing your time possibly, and you're also reducing your interest rate. So it helps in two different ways.
So since I work with investments at work, this is the one positive thing in today's environment, is you
Right.
can refinance, because it stinks on the investment side.
Right, so,
Yeah.
so as we try to, so when I explained that the $4.05 is our maximum we can do for debt reduction each year. So, as we keep our bonds, as we have increase in valuation, we can see a decrease in what our tax rate is, even at keeping at a $4.05 levy. So the question that was talked about at the meeting was, do we go out and he originally, meaning Travis Squires, went out 4 years and maxed out the 405 for 4 years. Then if we do that, then you kind of squelch yourself from doing any possible future bond issues in those 4 years, 3 to 4 years. But really, the other thing that he said is, if you're doing something 3 years from now, you should be working at it and planning it right now. So 3 years out is easy. It's that 4th year, do we see anything that's going to be a bond issue? In my small world right now, I don't see that, but do we want to just go with 3 years? We wouldn't have that big of a savings. The 2.195, I don't have the numbers that it would be if that were the case. So it was more of, as we talked about it, what is the feeling of the board? It isn't a vote, because he'll bring that back to us if we want to process that and go forward. So 3 years at the 405, 4 years.
And if you went 3 years, if you only did it for 3 years, you would lose some savings, but you could go prepay bonds that 4th year, not do a full
And you
refinancing.
may not get the savings, the biggest savings in the sales tax or the interest rate, but
Right.
you'd be close, probably.
Yeah, I just think, it just kind of gets down to, like you say, do you know, things can pop up.
But you'd think that a bond issue is
A
different
bond
than
issue is a plan
cost.
thing, it takes you a long time to figure out.
You have studies, you have, right.
And a, a high dollar asking for the most
Right.
part. I mean, the last bond issue was 29 million. We've been doing pay-as-you-go type projects for the smaller things. So I'm kind of like John, right now, I don't foresee there being a big bond asking.
I mean, if we were
Yeah,
Waukee or
short
something,
term.
we'd be like,
Short
heck
term.
no, because stuff pops, they're constantly building and doing things with growth, but.
In the next 4 years, if anything, it's happen to add on to a building or something to do with one of the buildings.
Right.
Our enrollment projection study, which hasn't quite held up this year, I know, but I still have high hopes that we get something back for our 20 grand. has our capacity at 3,950 students. That must be how many seats there are, whatever it is, can differ what it is. And we don't reach that until, according to projections, they show us doing that in 2023-24, so we got 4 years there without any trouble in that. You know, if these are at all accurate and everything, we're gonna start to see it, but it's still gonna be a while before anything needs to be done. So I would have no problem with 4.
4 would give us the best savings for us.
I'm good with 4,
Okay.
especially looking at that, the future there.
I will share that with, any others, I don't wanna,
I'm good.
I'll share that with them and then we'll start that process. So we'll be going through, you know, you'll see.
We'll have
the-
resolutions and
yeah,
things
there's
like that for you,
resolutions
like
and
we've done in the past.
legalese that we go through for this, so, but we'll step it through for you.
Thank you.
The other thing, Carolyn?
No, you went through some forecasts. I wasn't, I think I left.
Oh, yeah, you left.
I left, but
Ken?
We went through some forecasts after Carolyn left, so it went pretty quick. You've got them in front of you, the sheet, and he's got it up. Ha, I got him. Okay, it's coming up right there. Budgeted enrollment, Jana figured this out for us, very conservative. She just added 5 students a year.
Really scientific.
did we pay
And all of that.
$20,000 for that?
It's like, well, gee, you know.
She's bitter someday, she's just bitter. The tax rates are there. Cash reserve allowed, and that's how much we can levy for in those budget years. We want to stay under the cash reserve. We have our levy, we're trying to keep our solvency ratio 20% under, not trying to get over. We can only level for those amounts in those years for specified reasons that if you'd like to know, Jana can answer, I cannot on that one. General fund revenues, you'll see how that expands over 5 years. General fund expenditures, how that would do. An over and under amount. The unspent amount, which is that solvency ratio, as you see, we're going in that regard. So it's good to have projections, some idea what we're going.
And it
It's definitely
changes.
not in stone.
Yeah, it is, you know, it's, the further you get out, the harder it gets to project, but, you know, as we look now, we can, you know, we can kind of try to be stabilizing in our tax rate, stabilizing in the solvency and the unspent as well, so. It's a work in progress, continual.
Right. Facilities.
Really nothing new there. I don't think a thing has changed, John, it has it from last meeting.
They were supposed to meet with, the middle school cameras, but that's, I think,
We
you
did
just
actually.
met, yeah, so I didn't have any information when this went out.
I just got a quote tonight. Haven't reviewed it yet, so.
With the high school, where are we at
We
on
got the
that?
quote on that, we still need to get the second one.
I'm gonna ask it just because Rob asked it and I seriously couldn't remember. I'm losing it. What's our current plan for the old admin building? It's just kind of sitting there, right?
Yeah, I won't say we have a definite plan, we've kicked
Yeah.
around different
I know,
ideas.
and then everything kind of got too expensive or not really.
You know, the cost of renovating for student use
Yeah.
seemed pretty prohibitive.
Okay.
We have talked about some other potential uses that didn't involve students, but yeah, it's a great question. I don't have a solid plan for that building.
Are we able to rent it out at all for income?
I mean, I think it's a usable building. It has, it would depend, you know, what somebody needs out of it. It's got an HVAC that's gonna need to be replaced for sure. I don't know. I mean, it just depends if you wanna get in the business as landlord too, as a district. You know,
And then that building becomes taxable on the tax rolls again, because we're making money off it.
and we run into that in different ways where we try to make sure too that, you know, people aren't having a private benefit from public facilities. we could do it, but as Jonna says, then it gets a little complicated with,
I've always felt our best job is to take it down. You know, so we got the space, we wanna build something else. I can't see that being used for anything that we need, really.
you know, that's one option we've talked
Yeah,
about.
I mean, it's just an old crappy building with a lot of problems. Not designed for anything swell.
We are in the county that takes things.
Yeah, it's not swell. I mean, just,
Courthouse, we could
Make
have
it
it
a
be the
whole-
Well,
courthouse.
Yeah,
you know,
I
we
was
talk all the time about parking, and
Hello.
it would be
Turn it
a
into the
prime
jail.
spot for more parking.
all I know is that most of the time as I'm seeing bids and everything, people are telling me it's better to take down the old building and just build a new one. It's cheaper than trying to redo the building you have for the most part, when you consider a 20-year lifespan that should last for, or whatever you're considering it. But I don't know, I kind of felt that way. It's nothing serious.
You might see if you can dig out demolition cost. Didn't we get that at one point?
I know.
Not that one. Oh, it was the other one.
Oh, we did demo the DOT building, yeah, 50,000, yeah.
It had asbestos. We've removed the asbestos from there.
There is one more thing to consider with that building.
The ICN,
There is an ICN room there that all the connections through Warren County come through that, so if that's something we decide that we're
Iowa
going to
Communications Network.
level, we're gonna have to give them plenty of time to figure out what they're going to do also. We'll have to review our contract with them and our agreement with them from 20 years ago and see what that all amounts to.
It's with the county?
No, it was Iowa
State.
Communications Network.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's easy to forget because we don't use an ICN room anymore, and it's
Public
not,
schools,
But it's
health
internet too,
facilities,
isn't it?
it's not for us, it's not internet for us.
So we really have to be.
But it's internet for other schools, and, I mean, actually, even IMU has some stuff that goes into that building, so it's a pretty massive project to just say, we're gonna level it and move on.
Maybe for you.
Not for me, it's for them.
Okay, moving on to board policies.
yep. A couple of, we're ready for second reading, and I want to just mention a couple of proposed changes that we sort of backtracked on, had some questions, Annette and I had some conversation. We had a couple of very minor changes to a couple of curriculum ones where we had struck through some language, and we had some discussion last board meeting about this too. And I'll refer you specifically to what, those policies. 602.1, we had, last meeting, first reading, we had just struck through parents in that third bullet from the bottom, because we had community members, which included that. But then we talked about just the, removing the word parents from something too, and decided, that it was good to specifically call out parents there. So you'll notice this time we don't have the strike through that we had last time. So, but I just want to make you aware, since that was a change from first reading. And the other one was on 602.3, similar kind of deal, a little bit different, because in 602.1, community covered parents, so we were just feeling it was redundant. But this one, right now, we don't really involve parents, students, community members a whole lot in evaluation of curriculum, but we're kind of talking about exploring how we could do that. When you have policy and practice, you want them to line up, so you have those conversations, okay, do we need to change policy, do we need to change practice? And we had that struck through our first reading, but we put it back in there again, just because I think in our business, in our space, we always want to encourage more involvement, and I don't want really the appearance that we're trying to have less. So even though it's not really current practice, that's something we'll have to kind of investigate. I don't know if you want to jump in on any of that, Annette, or if I kind of captured it well enough.
Yeah, I think you captured it, and that's what we had talked about before too, is the optics of that, but we do wanna make sure, I'm a rule follower, not a kinda. If it states it, we're gonna do it, and we're gonna do it right, and so it's just that discussion of sometimes you have community members involved, but they might not always be parents, but if it's gonna be that way, then that's what we're gonna strive for. So that was just the discussion that we'd had about the language.
I like that, I guess, as a parent, And I like it at, if we're looking at elementary school curriculum, for elementary school parents to be involved, if you're looking at middle school, high school, so that it helps keep them focused on their kids' education and.
But also making sure that we're looking at research.
Right.
Sometimes we get involved in too many, like the opinion side, but we have strong research showing that this is the direction we should be going, and that's
Sure.
that balance
Sure.
in that too, so.
And, typically, I think, I want our, like Annette was saying, being a rule follower, I want our policies to be, okay, this is how we do business, and not have our policies be aspirational, like, wouldn't it be great if we did this? So that is an area we'll have to look at, getting practice to match with our policy. But anyway, I don't have to beat a dead horse there, but since those were different from first reading, those are the two things I wanted to mention. Otherwise, I think everything is the same we talked about last time, and this would be a second reading of those. Which would require action.
Hint, hint. I'm trying to get up to where the language is.
Okay,
I move
sorry.
approval of, do we have to do them separately?
No, we'll do them as a group.
Okay, I move approval of the policies as listed to the page, I haven't found it. I'm trying to get up to it, the numbers as listed in the.
Yeah, there's quite a list of them.
Yeah.
103, 203,
Right.
208, so forth.
All of those.
Motion made by Carolyn,
Second.
seconded by Lori. Any further board discussion on these policies, second reading? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
I guess the one thing coming out from tonight, though, like, going forward, if there are sections, which I know is kind of unusual, but like the thing with the nurses,
Mhm.
just encouraging, if it's kind of obvious that it might make sense to have someone like that
Yeah.
review it,
No,
going
this-
forward, that we just take note of that.
definitely,
I
yep,
don't think there's too many of them, but where there is stuff like that,
yep, I don't disagree.
add people to review.
Art has the building discipline.
Yep, and you have a second quarter building discipline report there as well. And it was an oversight on my part, and I apologize. First quarter, I had the school resource officer report as well, and synced those two up. And I didn't get that done with Officer Hackett, so hopefully next meeting, that'll be enough, I hope, notice for him to provide that as well. So you probably noticed that was not in there this time. You do have the building discipline reports there. One thing I think you noticed that Ron has started including, is the percentage move. And I would just remind you too, I don't know if you noticed this year to year, our second quarter totals are up quite a bit from the first quarter in terms of number of incidents. But our first quarter totals were way down, like 70+%, right? So that's just something for a little context for you.
Do you know how they compared to second quarter last year?
I didn't do that, but I
Okay.
could.
Okay.
I think they're kind of seasonal.
Yeah,
One of the concerns I have is, one of the reasons we're kind of asking this, and I think the layout points it out, so I think it's serving its purpose, but, I don't think there's any easy answers, but obviously there's some people that are habitual offenders,
Yeah.
like females in middle school. On this report, it's,
Yeah.
what do you do? I mean, is there anything you can do and try to get to the
Well,
root cause of it?
I mean,
or-
that's, any principal will tell you, and I would back this up from 10 years as a principal, that, you have a small percentage of students that are taking a lot of your time with discipline, and you have some that very definitely are repeat offenders. I don't really want to get into specific situations, I could tell you some, but I'd be getting into personally identifiable information.
Yeah,
And some of those situations, they're just very complicated. You have to try to keep working through them with students and parents. And you have students that are in a bad place, that are going through things where school is not their priority. And you have to,
do we have resources to try to, beyond discipline, where we're trying to encourage?
oh, absolutely. We try to understand, and people will tell you that who study behaviors for kids, that they're not a behavior problem. For them, that's a behavior solution. There's a reason. You have to look for the cause of what they're doing. And it's either they're trying to get something they need, or they're trying to avoid something they don't want. So assessing that, yeah, we do have resources. We work closely with the AA. They're a great resource. We do try to connect people with counseling,
Okay.
you know, if they need counseling, so. I know we have people working at this very diligently.
But I do think this, the way this is laid out does lend itself for you to notice that, which I think is
Definitely,
good,
yeah, absolutely.
How's the vaping? I mean, I don't know what it falls under,
Yeah,
if that's
let me-
tobacco or if that is,
Yeah,
under tobacco.
Okay.
For that work.
Can I ask a slightly related, unrelated question? What the heck is the thing with the new law saying they might allow guns on school property?
yeah.
What is going on with that?
That's a conservative legislature
It's
that
like
values
legislation.
Second Amendment rights.
Just
Oh my
proposed this week.
Yeah.
You
It'll
know,
probably die.
It's one of those that's,
I would be a little surprised if they allow that.
It'll,
It better die.
it'll die. It'll probably be dead by tomorrow. They,
Okay, this is hope, yeah, okay.
a lot of times they test the groups that react to it.
To see
and
what they
then
get,
See
yeah.
what happens and then judge it.
Got my
further
attention,
down.
it's like, wow, it's backwards.
Any other second quarter discipline questions?
Some member of the state senate wants to allow school property at parks.
I can, Rob, I can certainly start incorporating those comparisons.
The year to year?
The thing that I try to avoid, and I actually thought about it and didn't, that you start to get so much information in this,
I was just more
kinda
curious, just
messy.
since we've incorporated Officer Hackett, to see if that showed anything.
I can take a look.
I
And then
think-
just announce that in the meeting.
Talking to teachers in the high school and middle school, the ones that I've been able to get in front of so far, feel like, at least they've communicated to me that they felt like things feel calmer and stuff in the high school and middle school, so I'm hoping that's carrying over.
the incorporation of the SRO could too be why you have the increase, because perhaps maybe more of these are being reported, or being found. It's not necessarily means that
Sure.
there's more instances, maybe more instances are being discovered or
Yeah, they
reported.
didn't
So
get
it could
caught
be,
before.
the percentages could be misleading to a degree.
The next board agenda,
Yeah, and that's a direct, couple of things I can tell you will definitely be changed. You won't have another SiAC under that SiAC that got in this time, so under the curriculum. And Principal Johnson, under district, along with year-round school calendar, which we anticipate is supposed to be here to talk about transitional kindergarten considerations. Start get that, so, you know, this is always just a draft, but those are a couple of things I know will change.
You said, are things the 5th?
Yes, yep,
February 5th.
yep.
Next week.
Are we all riding, are we gonna carpool? Who's
Yeah,
all
I
going?
put that down as other, but everybody's signed up, all 7 plus me, so we have eight people.
Ken rode with me last time, I didn't kill it, did we?
I lived.
Yeah, you can sleep on the way home.
We all go in one, and takes out the whole board in one accident.
Yeah.
We get a band.
In the back with the horses can't, yeah.
That's not funny.
When we were in.
Yeah, they will all be.
What's that, February?
So, I'm happy to drive. I have a Ford Explorer, which is 6 people, I guess, if 2 wanna climb in back.
Yeah, I can drive too. I can go get 6 though.
I can drive to,
Do we just wanna meet out here then?
Yeah, let's meet here about 4:45, does that work?
Yeah.
that's the 5th, correct?
Yeah, February 5th.
Just a couple questions for myself. I didn't get to ask these up at the beginning or make a comment there. I was just wondering, the district survey that went out to community members and parents, when is that due back?
Yeah, it's back, and I just shared it with cabinet
Okay.
today. And I wanna talk about with the admin team too.
Okay,
I really, and we'll share it publicly, but I'm hoping we can have a board work session sometime too,
okay.
to consider the priorities that came out of that. I think that may inform our strategic planning a little bit that we need to do sometime this spring. So, it's on the way. It is back, it's on the way.
And was that sent out by AEA?
IASB did
IASB?
that for us, yep.
Okay.
Art,
okay.
they had dinner
Those-
for us last time, right?
Yeah, they will have.
I'll just say from a standpoint of looking back on it and stuff, when I looked at those questions, those were horribly worded questions.
You know, they are, that's a standard needs assessment they've done. One reason that, and you can pay more to have customized questions, but then you probably lose some of your comparability to, they've done this with like 100 other districts. So, yeah.
Okay. The second thing, not that I had any extra time, but I was reviewing this agenda today, and so I just picked up the phone. I called ACT today. I remember Ken and Carolyn had asked that question about ACT and how they figure out their scores for each year. That is done by
When they take the test.
when they take the test.
Not
So if a
what grade they
10th,
are.
11th, and 12th grader take it in that year, all of those tests are compiled to get the average. It does not go to future years. So they were definite on that. I got through a few different people and finally to the right department there, and that guy knew what he was talking, at least I presume he knew.
They've changed it now to where it's a cumulative score, correct, where you can take each section.
They're going there, I think.
Or going in that direction.
So I felt like that was good information to have that. One thing I wanted to bring up, I had discussed with Carolyn real quick here. I had been mainly talking to teachers at the high school again. Ben and I have half and half, and then I have the 8th grade teachers over at the middle school, and then of course my son's there, so I'm able to talk to other ones and stuff. So in my conversations with them, a couple concerning things. Everything's been very positive, but one thing I definitely want to look at is there's a policy in place, and you guys will have to correct me if I'm wrong. From talking to the teachers, there's a policy in place that kids, when they turn in late work, when they turn in homework, there is no late work. There is no penalty for turning in late work, is what they communicated to me. And they explained the reasoning behind it, and they said it's gone to a bad, what they feel is negative, and it's influencing students negatively. One of the teachers, for example, she said, where I used to have 8 kids that would turn in an assignment late, now I'm up to 60 to 70% of my students that turn in an assignment late. She said, we have students where I will pass out, this was another teacher, I have students where I pass out an assignment, kid by kid, and the students begin asking me right away, is this getting graded? And if it's not getting graded, they will not do that work. She said if it is being graded, and again, this is not all students, but there's a good majority of them that will wait until that assignment is done and graded by their peers, or then their peers' assignment's done. So you can understand where that's going, what they're looking at to get their own assignment done. So, again, they explained to me like the reasoning behind it, but they also said that they feel like it's going in a bad direction. So I would like for
That
you
sounds-
guys to,
I mean, that sounds like an appropriate conversation for the building, is the
Yeah.
first thing I would say.
yeah.
And I don't remember, maybe I'm not remembering correctly. I know we did the retakes, and that was a huge conversation. I don't remember the due dates on homework being
Yeah,
part of it.
there
I
was a
don't
lot
know
of
what that
conversation
was.
about retake, redo, particularly at the high school.
But
I remember a couple
redo is
years ago.
different than, like a test, you know what day the test is, you take the test, if you don't do well, you retake it, maybe. But like, I never realized that homework was not
You know, this might be a
getting
good,
dinged for not being done on,
this would be probably a
I didn't realize
good
that.
curriculum committee conversation too,
Yeah.
because I can tell you,
Absolutely.
grading practices is a huge issue, a big field of study. I think particularly middle schools and high schools have probably dealt with it for years. And I understand what you're saying, Rob, in terms of the motivation of, because I come from a coaching background, and I would say what gets measured, what gets emphasized, gets done is important. And yet, there's a lot of research with, when you're learning, that your formative assessment shouldn't necessarily be graded as they're learning, because then it turns into a punishment. You're punishing them for something they don't know. And that's probably a gross simplification. But could you kind of make a
Want me to
note?
put that on the
I
committee?
think that'd be a great future curriculum thing, and for the whole board, just to kind of build understanding. And I would need to look at building policies. I couldn't speak intelligently tonight about
I don't
about
know
that,
if you,
but-
yeah, and if you could maybe talk to those teachers at the middle, and the teachers
But
that
again,
I
we
spoke with.
can't, again, I don't wanna sound heavy-handed here, but those teachers need to be speaking with their principal too. I mean, most appropriately, that's a
Oh,
building
yeah.
conversation and
No.
not something that,
It was from, I just said, any concerns that you'd like to bring up or anything like that, and that was two things that, or one thing that I heard from multiple people, and I was like, oh, okay,
But we've
that makes
also
interesting.
had it for a few years, and I'd be curious, just as a follow-up, because it took a lot of conversations till we got to that point, to know if we think it's good practice. I know a lot of schools are doing it, but it's like, do we feel like it's accomplishing what we want, or is it just kind of,
And I did
preventing?
ask
I
them,
don't know.
I asked them, I said, so is this what everybody's feeling and thinking and stuff? And they said, well, it's more just grumbling, and from their perspective, they were saying, we have to go back and teach this stuff over and over again to multiple students, because they're waiting throughout the whole time period before they would turn something in. And they were trying to show me how much time is spent on that. And so, I guess from my perspective, as a parent, I guess I was like, I don't want my son developing bad practices that may influence how he, because I already know sometimes comments are made, you know, for things, and I'm always like, why do you feel like that? Like, why is that? Now I'm starting to understand it, I guess, a little bit, but I guess I'd like to know more, and yeah, if Mrs. Ellis or whoever can look into it with the building, I think it would be a good
but it's high
thing
school
to look
too,
at.
I think.
And I haven't talked about it over there.
No. So it's the homework that they're not
To
turning
these
in?
teachers, it was, they brought up the testing, retakes and stuff, but mainly it was the homework that they were concerned with, just
I mean, that's not, I mean, that's
and they
not
said it
kind of-
used to be, you know, they used to be able to have the practice of being able to figure out which students actually, like, hey, I know that student is struggling in this situation in their life, so I can give them a little bit extra time to do this. And they did it student by student, but they said unfortunately, all the students know this now, and they all are taking advantage of it in big time ways.
Well,
And
they think taking advantage is probably not taking advantage, but.
yeah, it's not helping them in the end at all.
I just know the board struggled with it, and I know that it's the wave of the future and all that, but I'd just be curious as to if that really, we feel like it's working, or if it's not.
I think there's a parent communication aspect to it too, and I'll be glad to put that on for the subcommittee, because if parents are informed whether their children are completing their work or not, they can be heavily involved in making sure that that practice work is getting completed. So there's several different factors that go into that with the research, home support, and then expectations and motivations in the classroom too, so.
As we've talked about going around in different schools and everything, you and I had a conversation, do we get all the schools covered? We were worried, I
was at Wilder today, so.
And I was at Wilder today. I got the middle school 6th and 7th graders February, not next week, but the following week.
Have Emerson?
Rob and I are at the high school, so I was there on.
and who's Irving?
I think we decided like we were gonna
Oh,
collaborate.
that's right, because you guys.
I wasn't
You guys
there,
were
nobody,
there a lot.
I only got
Who's
told
Whittier?
Wilder, cause I left that meeting
Yeah.
early,
No,
so.
well, no,
So
Whittier.
Who are you
I'm happy
talking
to do
about?
Whittier,
Irving.
Irving too.
Irving.
I just-
Irving or Whittier?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure all the schools got covered, I got to thinking about that.
I'm happy to do Irving too, I just didn't, I only got word about Wilder, so that's the only.
I
message
mean,
I
I've
got.
talked to a lot of the Irving teachers just because I'm in there
Well, I'm
and high
in
school.
there.
And you're there
Those
too,
times.
I know. And
And
we're-
remember, we gotta be
And
bringing
Ben's
stuff
there.
back and telling everybody else, just
I know about
saying I talked to people, we gotta know who we talked to.
I'll tell
check it
you,
out.
Wilder
Because we don't
was-
wanna insult anybody by missing, that's our big thing on this one.
I'll tell you, I did hear at the wrestling meet, was it last week? Did I email you? I emailed Rob. I had probably 5 teachers that were, and one of them was your daughter stopped by, just say that they thought commending the board, taking the extra time, going out and meeting with the teachers. They thought that was one of the greatest ideas, so you guys get to know who they are and what they're about. They commended Rob and the board of doing that, so I think there's been a lot of positive out of it.
No, it is, just so we can come back and
I just
share the
ate too many
stories.
Seminoles
I
this
thought
morning.
we're gonna get that on the agenda, so we all share it sometime. You know.
Okay.
Thank you for having Ed look in the transitional kindergarten.
Hey,
Tomorrow
tomorrow,
or other, are we kind of on the
Yeah,
other?
sorry.
Okay, so real quick, with the upcoming vote, I started putting some material together only to this morning, see that the Indianola Advocate had a really nice article.
did
I
have a
saw
nice
that.
article.
I
saw that
know, I
this
wish I
morning,
would have
too.
seen that
thought it
before I
was-
spent hours working on this other thing.
I know, and I thought, we don't need to do that, because they already did it.
So I'm gonna take it back and, Jonna and I are gonna talk after this and, I'm gonna tweak it around and then share it with people to get comments. I'm also gonna look into like, if we talk to them at the, it's not electronic newspaper, whatever they are, to see like if there's a way to link, even though you have to kind of be a member, maybe that would help them with membership, if you kind of have a link and maybe it's free, but then if you like what you see, whatever. But it was very well written and, I'm gonna try to incorporate that. Yeah. So I'm working on that.
Okay, awesome.
Not the most efficient way, but.
Ray, I have a question. We have a technology meeting tomorrow. I've now been texted I have a meeting tomorrow morning for, the Heal House to get a, sales agreement. My only question for technology is where are we at with the boards? Are they here yet?
No, they won't be here for at least 6 more weeks,
Oh, 6, okay.
at least.
So we're probably talking they
I've
won't
heard-
get
I've
them in
heard-
this year,
I'd say there's still a possibility of that.
maybe? Okay. And then
As
just
soon
the
as I know.
cameras, that was my next, where we
Can I move to
brought in
adjourn?
cameras.
Time I don't get that.
Susan,
Yeah, I
done
think
with
so.
other?
Yeah,
Adjourn.
Carolyn, Ross,
I'm able.
you're still on for tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I get done,
Give us a second.
I'll-
He's
I'll
seconding.
second it. He was in-
if I get done, I'll come.
Aye.
Motion made by Ken, seconded by Ben.
Yes.
Everybody
Aye,
in favor?
aye, aye, aye.
Ken's gonna turn into a pumpkin here